Welcome to the October 22nd, 2020 School Board meeting. I am Chair Monique O'Grady. This meeting is now in session and is being conducted by electronic communications using Microsoft Teams due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency. We will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are now at the citizen comment portion of our meeting. The school board welcomes public comment from community members. Due to the COVID-19 emergency, we have adjusted our speaker process. At this time, we can only allow call-in speakers who have signed up in advance. Directions for signing up are posted on our website, and the speaker request form is activated on our website on Friday afternoon, the week before the board meeting. We are using a purchase service to manage calls and have adjusted procedures to minimize cost, including limiting the time for all speakers to no more than 1 hour at each regular board meeting. We ask speakers to sign up by 4 p.m. 2 days prior to the meeting. If there are no speakers signed up by that time, we will cancel the call-in service at a minimum cost. Otherwise, we will have to pay the full cost, even if we do not use the service. We are also making plans to start holding on-site meetings beginning in mid-November, and we may adjust our speaker process at that time to allow in-person speakers. We will provide detailed information in advance when that option becomes available. We will refine our speaker procedures as needed if we find more effective ways to allow public comment. We have 30 speakers who signed up tonight, so I will review our approved speaker guidelines before we begin. As I mentioned during virtual meetings, we will hear all public comments at the beginning of the meeting. The day of the meeting, speakers who have signed up are asked to call the number provided 10 minutes prior to the meeting start. Speakers will be announced in the order their call is received. Before you speak, please turn down the sound on all electronic devices. Please do not use a speakerphone, as that can distort the sound and make your comments difficult to understand. Each speaker may speak for up to 2 minutes, and there is a timer that will help you keep track of your time. The timer begins when callers start speaking. Please conclude your remarks when the buzzer sounds. The operator will disconnect your call after 2 minutes. Please note, the school board does not respond to public comments during the meeting. If follow-up is required due to the nature of the comments, the superintendent will work with the school board clerk to follow up with speakers accordingly after the board meeting. Please email any written comments to school.board@apsva.us. Please be sure to state your name and the topic you will speak about when you begin. Ms. Mercado, will you please call the first speaker?
Yes, first speaker is Nick Jackson.
I'm Nick Jackson, and I ask you to move the entire McKinley Elementary community to the new Reed School. You have an opportunity to be the superheroes that APS families need by keeping the McKinley community together. To say we're going through unprecedented times is not hyperbole. My kids have not set foot in their school since March 13th, 223 days ago. Despite these tumultuous times, APS insists on pursuing a rush boundary move. APS communicated that only a small fraction of students are affected by the current proposal, but this statement ignores the magnitude of that impact on the affected students. Under the boundary proposal, students at the thriving McKinley Elementary School will be split among 3 schools. 40% of McKinley students will be sent to overcrowded schools where the building infrastructure and HVAC systems are not up to the challenge of the pandemic, where art and music rooms are co-opted into classrooms to handle overcapacity, and where trailers overtake basketball courts and field space. The new Reed School building has the capacity to handle the complete transfer of the McKinley school population based on APS's own data. The McKinley PTA, CCPTA, and our community all support keeping the entire McKinley community together. This also enables Tuckahoe, Ashland, and Glebe to maintain their enrollment at manageable levels. If the unpopular boundary proposal continues forward, APS will force schools to take a student at almost 130% of capacity. And what is even worse is that APS then lost in that mistake due to your policy preventing serial boundary moves for the same students. You have a chance to be the community superheroes during a time when our students need saving most. Our kids need stability. Please ensure that APS undertakes a countywide and holistic boundary plan in a future year rather than this piecemeal process. Keep the McKinley Elementary School community together now and give yourselves the flexibility to get this right in a future year.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Alessandra Bajak.
Hi, my name is Alessandra Bakai, and I'm a teacher at Yorktown High School speaking about the return to school plan. I come to you this evening as a proxy for the many voices we have not heard from our community. As I analyze the myriad messages we receive each week regarding our return to buildings, I see several paths of concern. The first is there is a disconnect in the messaging we receive from APS. This is resulting in a deeply divided community where parents and staff are at odds with one another because we hear different details of the same plan. APS leadership has a responsibility to unify their communication strategy and keep us as a united school system, not a system of schools. It is paramount that we work toward the same goal, to educate our children. This requires consistency of message and consistency of expectation. The ELT must deploy its members to do an accurate dry run of school day from arrival to dismissal, following all proposed procedures. The example video of a day in the life is grossly idealistic and is an inaccurate representation of what in-person will look like. The second concern is that APS does not trust its staff professional expertise. We know children. We can anticipate the challenges we will face. Listen to those who will be doing this work on the ground. How will a teacher comfort a crying 5-year-old? What happens when a child sneezes and soils their mask? What if students who forget their pencils, paper, iPads, chargers? Will teachers be required to provide the materials for the individual bins of supplies? Who will pay for them? How will staff be notified of the exposure to COVID? There are still so many unanswered questions. Finally, we must accept that students will continue to spend at least 60% of their school hours in the virtual setting. So let's commit to improving the virtual experience. The technology is still lacking. Teams is a business platform for adults, not an educational one for students. It is not versatile enough for the classroom. We must look to the best practices for the virtual environment and science-based research to enhance the virtual learning experience. APS has a responsibility to unite our community and keep us safe. Thank you for your efforts.
I'm very sorry your time is up, but I do appreciate you calling in, and if you'd like, you're welcome to send your comments in writing so we can hear the end. Thank you very much. Ms. Mercado, next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Mr. Mike Flood.
Good evening. My name is Mike Flood, and I am representing over 200 families that are concerned with the proposed boundary map that moves planning units 14070 and 14080 from McKinley to Glebe in lieu of to Reed. A mere 11% of McKinley children will transfer to Glebe. Under this plan, Glebe is projected to be grossly over capacity at 128%. Furthermore, the majority of Glebe children are projected to attend Ham for middle school, while our children will rightfully attend Swanson, a mere half-mile away. Therefore, our children will be isolated twice from their community. First, by attending Glebe away from their friends, and secondly, by going back to Swanson with few children from Glebe. Conversely, Glebe is 0.9 miles from our neighborhood, and the county has installed numerous safety measures over the past 40 years so our children can safely attend their community schools at Swanson and Reed. There are 9 crosswalks, 3 stoplights, 1 crossing guard, and absolutely no 4-lane roads on the way to Swanson and Reed. Finally, Reed is projected to open under capacity to 87% and decline to 80% the following year. We project that planning units 14070 and 14080 can easily be added to Reed, which would still open under capacity. We believe that sending our children to their community school of Reed will allow the school board to meet its goals of minimizing disruption, balancing capacity, and maintaining community, a community we've been a part of for 40 years. Thank you for your consideration of our recommendations, and we look forward to working with you to have our children safely attend our community school of Reed.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Ms. Mercado, next speaker, please. Ms. Mercado, is it possible to call for the next speaker?
Yes, the next speaker is Lily Israel.
I'm sorry, we didn't hear the name of the next speaker. Is the next speaker queued up and ready to go?
Yes, Ms. Christine Ballon is on now.
Okay, speaker, you may begin. Ms. Mercado, could you please repeat the name of the speaker? We had trouble hearing you.
The next speaker is Christine Ballon.
Christine Boulon?
Yes,
Did you say Christine Boland?
That's
Yes.
it. Thank you very much, and you're welcome to
Hi.
proceed. I'm sorry for the confusion.
That's all right. It went silent for a moment. My name is Christine Boland, and I teach at Yorktown High School. The decision to return to buildings should not be guided by parents' demands that we sacrifice our health or our lives for our jobs. The CDC has stated this week that a series of brief interactions, adding up to 15 non-consecutive minutes of total exposure in shared indoor space within 24 hours, is enough to infect someone. They report that the virus lingers in indoor air across distances over 6 feet from the infected person and stays there for multiple hours. Understood. Schools can't be made safe. We should focus on supporting virtual instruction. My students are excelling, and I have better attendance than I ever have before in over 10 years of teaching. Yes, this is a new learning context, and it presents new challenges. But at the end of the day, there is one thing that we cannot offer with hybrid: consistency. My students have a predictable routine. They attend their classes, and they do their work. Learning is going well, and it's consistent. We've settled into a rhythm. The alternative is a high-stress nightmare with greater gaps in educational delivery. If we return to buildings, as we've seen in the districts that pushed and went face-to-face already, there would be a rolling cascade of partial closures as teachers and classrooms with students are compelled to quarantine after every exposure. We won't know about exposures until someone has symptoms and bothers to get tested because we have no testing policy or plan. That person could have mingled with hundreds by that point, sitting in 7 different classrooms with 15 students for 90 minutes each, when it just takes 15 to infect. With multiple cohort quarantines, we will have learning gaps. Some teachers and staff would be severely sick, hospitalized, and unable to plan and deliver their curriculum or support their students, with whom they form strong relationships. What will we tell students when their teacher dies? Everyone has to eat lunch and drink water in the same high-risk way. Masks off. You won't know if I'm spreading coronavirus to your kids if I'm infected because I won't be tested. But I would be interacting with over 100 kids who will interact with the other 2,000 in the school. Let's stay safe, let's stay consistent, and let's focus on virtual learning success. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mercado, can you share the next speaker, please?
Next speaker is Lily Israel.
I believe that was Lily Israel.
My name is Lily Israel, and I'm a 10th grade student at HB Woodlawn. I love my school. I feel so lucky to be part of the HB community. And I love my teachers. They are the kindest, most selfless, hardworking people. They're the kind of people who will stay up until 4 a.m. making a presentation because they found a new way to keep us engaged. They're the kind of people who will throw out their lesson plan when their student gets lost in an interesting conversation and just wants to keep talking, even virtually. And they're the kind of people who you can connect with, even through a screen, who will give up their free time no matter what it is we need, and who are so positive and keep engaging with us even when all they see is a screen of black boxes. I've heard a lot of criticism about distance learning, that it doesn't work, that nobody has learned anything, that it's failing APS students. And yes, it's hard, but so is school in person. This year has been hard for all of us, but it's not a failure. I am learning. I understand that a lot of people want to go back to school. I do too, and I hope we can get back there as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we should follow the science, which has explicitly shown that it's not safe for large groups to gather indoors right now. And instead of giving teachers an ultimatum or telling them that they're lazy and should just do their jobs, I think people would do well to reject confirmation bias, which is the tendency to search for information to support our preconceptions and to ignore or distort contradictory evidence, which I learned all about in AP Psych this year. So we can see all what an amazing job the APS teachers and staff are doing. Teachers are teaching, and they deserve the right to teach where they feel safest. I want to support them the way they've always supported me. I think we all should. Thank you.
And thank you for calling in and sharing your comments. Ms. Mercado, next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Maxwell Mark.
I believe the next speaker is Courtney Fox.
I'm sorry, yes, the next speaker is Courtney Fox. Sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Grady, do you mind calling the name again? I don't think the operator's hearing me.
No worries. Courtney Fox, you are, it's your turn. Please begin speaking.
My name is Courtney Fox, and while our community has become bitterly divided, I want to remind us all that we want the same thing, our old normal. Sadly, COVID took that away from us. COVID is the only enemy here. There are different opinions within our community about what is safe and what isn't. There are differing views about what's working and what isn't, and about who should be prioritized over whom. There is no doubt that this year is hard for us all. We are all experiencing the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. As much as we all want some semblance of normal this year, that ship has sailed. And if we cannibalize our school system with attacks, it'll take even longer to emerge from this crisis. There is no possible scenario this year that will make everyone happy. We must acknowledge current constraints, adjust expectations, and try to empathize with each other. APS teachers and staff are not the enemy. Attacks on them hurt us all. They deserve to feel safe. We should honor their choice, whether it's hybrid or virtual, and then establish in-person capacity. We should not force teachers to choose between their jobs and their safety. In addition to being immoral, it's impractical. Who will teach their classes if they quit? We are in the midst of a pandemic and a national teacher shortage. Virtual instruction should not take a backseat to hybrid. Enormous virtual classrooms to offset physical distancing in hybrid is unacceptable. Yet that is what Ms. Loft suggested last Friday. I urge you to publicly reject that tonight. And I urge you to use brain research and best practices to empower virtual instruction success. Finally, we must prioritize those who are truly in need, whose boats are sinking. That's equity, and it's time to start closing the gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your comments. Ms. Mercado, next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Maxwell.
I believe that was Maxwell Merck is our next speaker. You may begin speaking now.
Hello, my name is Maxwell Mark. I'm 9 years old and I go to school Lucky. After the last school board meeting, I heard a speaker tell all APS employees to just be brave. It made me mad. First, I want to say thank you, Dr. Dulon, for you being brave and making your first big decision to ensure students and staff don't return to school until it's safe. Second, I want to say that my mom is an APS social worker and my dad is an APS teacher, and they are already brave. They help their students all day, every day, even when my brother and I sometimes need help during the school day. But we know they can't help, so we understand. People keep saying they want to go back to school so they can hang out with their friends. But I don't think my mom and dad risking their lives is worth hanging out with my friends. I also want to keep taking care of my grandma, and we can't do that if we all go back. I take my family over hanging out with my friends. My teachers are great, and virtual learning is going well, so why change everything? I have the best teachers in the world, and I don't want to change teachers now. Lastly, I want you to know it is not safe to go back. I'm not talking about all that science stuff on the news. I'm talking about the field behind my house. I can't go outside to play baseball with my brother because we are usually the only ones wearing masks and socially distancing. Kids at the park even make fun of us of being safe, and they tell us we're taking COVID too serious. These are APS kids playing basketball and tackle football with no masks. They are not being safe now. Do you think they'll be safe once we are back? Because I don't. Thank you.
And thank you for calling in and sharing your comments. Ms. Mercado, may we have the next speaker, please?
The next speaker is Miranda Turner.
I believe that was Miranda Turner.
My name is Miranda Turner, parent of an APS third grader in kindergarten, speaking on return to school. Tonight I'd like to first share information you may not know and then talk about something you do know. The first is that the evidence, science, and data show that return to school is possible without increasing risk to teachers, staff, or students over what we are all already living with. A German study released a week ago made the causal connection that returning to school did not increase infections. Instead, it showed that for students under the age of 14, school reopening may be causally linked to lower case rates. A study in Spain, reported this week by NPR, concluded that schools being opened, quote, makes absolutely no difference for COVID rates. These schools are using many of the same protocols APS is planning for. In this country, Emily Oster is collecting data from schools nationwide. Her data shows that COVID rates among teachers and staff in schools that have reopened in person are the same or lower than for teachers and staff who are 100% remote. This evidence shows that schools do not make spread worse, even if opening is not risk-free. My second point is something you do already know, which is that education is most effective in person. The all-virtual learning model is failing many students, which you also know. It's now up to you, the decision makers, to put these pieces of information together. The fact that students need to be educated in person, together with the fact that schools do not make spread worse. These are facts, not fears. Fear is driving what is happening now, and what is happening now is a complete failure of our progressive values and ideals. We are ignoring evidence and data. We are sacrificing our future to serve our present. We are consigning the most vulnerable and innocent, our children, to a form of education we know does not meet their needs. We are abandoning the goal of a high-quality public education that can lift children up and allow them to achieve to their level of ability. We are elevating the preferences of adults over the needs of children and leaving those children with no choice at all. Our students need your support. It is not too late to do better. We should start right away. Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in and sharing your comments. Ms. Mercado, may we have the next speaker, please?
Yes, the next speaker is Julie Hannon.
I believe that was Julie Hannock. You may begin speaking now.
Hi, my name is Julie Hannock, and my topic is return to school. Science supports opening schools, but is being ignored due to teacher preference, not need. No other profession is getting this indulgence. The unknown is scary, but fear is not a sound metric. Some teachers truly need to remain virtual due to medical issues, but outside of that, why does a teacher's comfort or preference outweigh a student's need? Parents wanting in-person instruction do not want to take virtual from those family and staff that need it. I am following the science and find it presumptuous and insulting that many opposed to what my child and other children need call me entitled. Yes, I am working on behalf of my children, but also for those who don't have a voice to advocate for them. Studies and science prove that schools can be opened safely. Those acting like in-person school is dangerous are the anti-science and comparable to someone who won't wear a mask. Dr. Duran and staff, be strong indeed. Your kids want back in the building. You want back in the building. You indicated this over the summer, so teachers should have expected it when they signed their contracts. Healthcare providers, military, first responders, grocery workers are working in person regardless of their comfort. They did not sign up for a pandemic. It's insulting to say this to parents who's in these professions that they signed up for this. No, they didn't. APS has the luxury of listening to schools that have safely opened in person. Ask them how they do it. Teachers, ask your friends who have returned in person how great it is to be back with their students. APS staff has confirmed over and over again that proper PPE is in place to mitigate spread. APS staff, please state for the record why the APS dashboard includes arbitrary health metrics for emergency room visits and ICU headspace. These are not part of Governor Arlington VDOE CDC recommendations. Why are they there? Explain why the busing plan is most restrictive under VDOE guidance. It assumes Virginia is in phase 1, not phase 3. Please do not let these operations that can be solved keep you from educating our children properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in and sharing your comments. May we have the next speaker, please?
Our next speaker is Dan Carroll.
Good evening. My name is Dan Carroll. I'm an APS teacher and a resident of Arlington County. Tonight, I would like to support the plan to commit to 100% virtual instruction for the entire 2021 school year. Virtual instruction is valid and effective. It works. Teachers across the county are reporting increases in student engagement and performance. It works, and it can work better. Given the cards we have been dealt by the pandemic, we have made the best win possible. All the current plans for hybrid learning expose us to two major downsides. One, putting staff and students at risk, and two, reducing the effectiveness of instruction. Instead of a win, hybrid learning will create a lose-lose. A pandemic-safe, in-person classroom would have no science labs, no sharing of materials, no small group work, no collaboration, and no sitting with a teacher to get one-to-one help. It essentially will just be a place for kids to sit and do their work. We will gain nothing for the risk we assume. Scientific data tells us that it is likely we'll have a death if we go to in-person hybrid format. Imagine how we will feel receiving the first email that a child, teacher, or other staff member has died of COVID. The transition from virtual to hybrid and then possibly back to virtual again is already creating uncertainty and chaos for teachers, students, and families even before we begin. Let us think of more creative ways to provide the type of supports that students need to be successful in their virtual learning that are lower in risk and more supportive than sitting all day in a desk in the classroom. I encourage APS to abandon all current plans for in-person instruction and to fully commit to 100% virtual. When this pandemic is finally over, let us be able to look back and say, we made the wise choice. We focused on making virtual instruction the best it can be. We focused on the win. Thank you very much for your help, and thank you, Dr. Duran, for your support.
Thank you very much for calling in and sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Kayla Leonberger.
Hi, my name is Kayla Leonberger, and I teach at Thomas Jefferson Middle School. I want to address something that I've noticed in people's opinions about returning to in-person instruction. People seem to imagine an idealistic picture of a classroom, a large open classroom with windows and sunlight and proper ventilation. I love my school, but this image does not fit a large majority of our classroom spaces. Of the approximately 98 classrooms in our school, only 19 have windows. That's 19%, or less than a fifth of classrooms that have windows. And that's not even considering whether or not those windows can open. Additionally, according to the HVAC study that APS commissioned from a third party, 47% of classroom spaces in our school do not meet ventilation requirements. They suggested professionally that we update our HVAC system. However, it is currently upgraded to the highest level filter, 8, that our building can do. The CDC recommended level is 13, not even close to what our building can provide. Speaking of the CDC now defines close contact as being within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes within 24 hours. Our hybrid model puts students within 6 feet of each other for 7 hours every 24 hours. We are not following the CDC requirements with the current hybrid plan, and doing so is putting students and staff at risk. So next time you think myself or my hardworking peers are just lazy or cowardly, remember that there are school buildings in one of the richest counties in America that literally don't have the infrastructure to meet minimum CDC guidelines to protect our students. And I know because I teach at one. T.S. Go Yellow Jackets.
Thank you very much for sharing your comments with us today. Next speaker.
Next, we have Marissa Mulholland.
My name is Marissa Mulholland, and I'm a special education teacher speaking about schools reopening. The ongoing debate between some parents and teachers during school board meetings and on social media is creating a toxic environment for all of us and setting a poor example for our children. We are only 6.5 weeks into the school year, and it is going to be a long road to June if this divided line and the negativity that comes along with it grows. Establishing a positive, collaborative relationship between parents and teachers is essential at the beginning of any school year, but even more so during a year that starts off virtually. Sadly, we seem to have skipped over this and moved straight into academics and technology. We all need to take a step back and remind each other that we are all on the same page. We all want the same things. We all want your children to succeed. We all want them to have the best school experience possible, and we all love your children. And like you, we wish that there was an option on the survey for teachers to stay with their current students instead of potentially being moved to another classroom. Many decisions are out of our control, but we can focus on things that are within our control, like our responses. Parent comments such as be brave and go back into the classroom is not supportive language. Instead, find a way to be helpful. Advocate for APS to provide COVID testing for staff and students. Ask teachers if there's any supplies they need before they spend money out of their pockets prepping for hybrid. My response to the parent comment, teachers, go do your job or find another one, would be this. We've never stopped doing our jobs. In fact, we've taken on additional ones. We have become social workers and therapists, not only to our students and families, but to our colleagues as well. Parents, we value you and the important role you play in your child's education. Teachers only ask that you value and support us in return. Model gratitude and kindness. Appreciation has a lasting effect. And please remember, we are all on the same side. COVID is on the other side. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
And thank you very much for calling in and sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Danielle Anctil.
Good evening. My name is Danielle Anctil, and I've been teaching in APS for 21 years. At the County Board Virtual Town Hall on Friday, our Health Director, Dr. Varghese, announced we are still in the community-wide transmission phase of this pandemic. He showed data demonstrating how since we opened in Phase 3, we have had a steady band of COVID cases, and says, and I quote, "It is disturbing we still have this much transmission, which is why we continue to ask people to stay at home as much as possible." Despite all of our wishes to remain positive and upbeat, anxiety is off the chart on the part of staff in terms of personal safety. Goalposts raise the level of anxiety as questions remain unanswered and positive tests and hospitalizations continue to spike. Concerns for personal safety should be taken seriously. The tri-component plan for hybrid school reopening in November with 1 day asynchronous, 2 days virtual, and 2 days synchronous is an extremely complex model. Putting these three components together in a way that provides meaningful, effective, challenging, and seamless instruction for our students is not the way to set up your staff, students, or families for success. We are just now getting to the point of proficiency in managing the technology required for teaching and learning in a virtual environment, and beginning to feel a sense of accomplishment as we experience the initial phases of success with our students. Before adding in a new model, why not let us get this virtual model right instead of stacking one initiative on top of another? The tri-component model will not allow for measuring efficacy. In our urgency to respond to the Open Schools Now movement, my hope is that all voices are represented in decision-making, especially the vulnerable, who are not always part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Mei Lee Han.
My name is Mei Lee Han. I am a junior at Wakefield High School, and I am speaking about school reopening. It has come to my attention that parents are speaking for their children, when in reality, I don't need an adult to tell people my opinion. I miss school, I miss basketball, I miss seeing my friends. But I understand that we are in the middle of a dangerous pandemic, and I'm willing to make sacrifices to ensure my future and to protect both my health and the health of my family, friends, and people in my community. I made the decision to remain virtual all year. Virtual school is not the best thing I have ever done, but is working just fine. I am learning, and I am safe. I was able to make a choice to continue learning and to protect my health. I ask you to give that same choice to APS teachers. Teachers are what makes APS great. I love my teachers, well, some of them more than others, and I want them to be safe too. I don't feel like any of us will be safe yet if we go back now. I can tell you that I will be much more traumatized if one of my teachers gets sick or worse, yet dies. You can put as many safety precautions and procedures as you want, but as a student, I know people will break those rules. Kids don't need school for socializing. I see them wandering all over my neighborhood. We can't pretend that things are normal or safe. We can't just wish for life to be the way it was. You will be helping your students if you keep our teachers safe. Families have a real choice. Teachers need one too. Thank you.
And thank you for calling in and sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Katie Jeffco.
My name is Katie Jeffco, and I am an elementary and middle school parent. We all want the same thing, a robust learning experience for our students. Imagine if we could lock arms and approach that as a united APS community, us against the virus, not one group against the other. Dr. Duran, although this road is filled with landmines, we see you struggle with some of these decisions. We also see your empathy, your commitment, and your extensive community engagement. Dr. Duran, I want to thank you for your leadership. Trust has been lacking here in Arlington for a long time. Transparency builds trust, and we very much want to trust this process. So tonight, I'm asking you to please keep sharing with us and encourage the same from APS principals. At the elementary level, whether a family chooses all virtual or hybrid, every student will spend at least 60% of their school time in a virtual classroom. We need to get this right. I'm not advocating for one model over another. I know virtual may not work for some, but I believe a strong virtual experience is the best interest of the collective APS community. Right now, virtual feels like an afterthought, but please be transparent about your priorities, and because transparency builds trust, and class size matters. At the elementary level, classes are not lectures. They're interactive. Children want and do engage, but this will become so much harder if classes are huge and mixed age. Class size standards should be the same for both groups of children. Adding extra kids to a virtual class is short-sighted and detrimental to all involved. Please be transparent about who's responsible for determining class size, principals, or the central office. Transparency builds trust. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Laura Holtree-Hume.
To start, thank you to the teachers, staff, school administrators, and school board for your tireless efforts during this difficult time. The unfortunate reality is that no matter how hard you work, it is impossible to give parents what we want, a return to normal school as we knew it. Thank you for your service. My daughter's virtual kindergarten has been nothing short of amazing. For that, I am very grateful. But I recognize that this is not the case for all students for any number of reasons: social, emotional, mental health, learning, financial, personal, or family needs that make distance learning difficult or impossible. For that reason, along with the protection of teachers so that they are not forced into schools in which they do not feel safe, we have chosen to remain virtual to save a spot for students for whom distance learning is not working out and for teachers who feel the need to remain virtual. I understand that there are parents who want their children in school now. I also understand that there are teachers who feel pressured to return despite circumstances that make the return unsafe to them or their families. I respect both, but am dismayed that the return to school survey pressured teachers into selecting hybrid without consideration for extenuating factors. This isn't just wrong, it's bad business. We face the very real risk that teachers will leave the profession for lower-risk jobs that value their safety and opinion at higher salaries. We can argue about how we got here, but the fact is that we are faced with a multivariable equation with seemingly infinite factors. It is going to be impossible to match parent preferences with available spaces and teacher requests without compromises. Compromises are necessary if we are going to have real equity in prioritizing students with greater needs for whatever reason to gain access to education. These students are the ones who need fairness and equity most of all. So I ask you, Dr. Duran and the school board, to listen to our teachers, to prioritize their needs above external pressures and have their availability drive supply in our schools. Once we know that supply, I implore you to think deeply about what is most equitable for our most at-risk students and prioritize them for hybrid learning and not be unduly influenced or pressured into decisions driven by unrealistic desires to return to a normal year that is impossible to deliver. Thank you from Heather Wishart-Smith, Discovery Kindergarten Parent.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Hillary Siegel.
My name is Hillary Siegel, and I'm a fourth grade teacher. I'm speaking about the return to school plan. Members of the board, I urge you to reconsider your hybrid model. Listen to an elementary teacher's perspective. In addition to the countless safety issues, there are a number of pedagogical pitfalls in the hybrid model that you need to be aware of before continuing with this choice. Because of these concerns, I believe that virtual learning will be more effective for students compared to the current hybrid option. You've claimed that this hybrid model is essential for students' emotional well-being. In actuality, children will be ripped from the comfort and consistency of their class. It is quite possible, if not certain, they will be in a new classroom with new classmates and new teachers.
They must yet again adapt to another new situation after building a class community for over 3 months. The current hybrid option has students following schedules and procedures for 3 different types of instruction throughout the week. The virtual setting provides the consistency and emotional stability that people, especially children, need. You want children in APS to receive the best education. You want them to be prepared for their academic futures. I want that for them. This hybrid model will not set them up for success. It is deceiving. It is not school as you know it. Teachers cannot provide the best education possible in this hybrid model. Small group and one-on-one instruction allows for individualization, targeted instruction, and differentiation, and I can only safely provide that in the virtual model. Our district is not ready for this hybrid model. I beg you to hear our voices. I choose virtual for the safety of our community, to give my students stability, and to provide the best education possible. I choose virtual until you create a hybrid plan that will meet the emotional and academic needs of my students. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for taking the time to call in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Norman Gorsees.
Good evening. My name is Norman Gorsuch. My twin daughters are currently 3rd graders at McKinley, and my son is a kindergartner. My wife, Shakti Shukla, is a room parent in all 3 of their classrooms and a McKinley Elementary and APS alum. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the ongoing elementary school boundary process. Under the initial proposal, my kids, along with hundreds of other students across 7 schools, would be separated from their friends, beloved teachers, and community in the middle of a global pandemic. They would instead be sent to new schools where integrating into a new community is challenging at the best of times, and even more difficult next year if we remain in a virtual or hybrid school environment. And personally, I'm heartbroken at the idea that my kids, who adore McKinley teachers and school staff, unknowingly had their last day in that warm, welcoming environment back in March. It's a thought that hangs heavy over all of us in the McKinley community who are facing a move in the school in a new school next year, a move to a new school next year. I'm also concerned that making these boundary changes at this time will exacerbate overcrowding at both Glebe Elementary and Ashland Elementary, needlessly disrupt the Tuckahoe school community, and potentially hinder APS's ability to make boundary changes in the future. These future changes are necessarily to truly address countywide capacity issues and set up our kids to remain in stable school communities for years to come. I'm here to ask you to please consider 3 changes to the boundary process. First, many in our community and across all the schools affected by this boundary change would like APS to suspend this limited boundary process. APS should focus on generating a truly comprehensive boundary plan to balance capacity and enrollment discrepancies across the entire county, distribute option schools as needed, and allow our kids to return to school safely when the conditions of the pandemic allow. Second, if the process can't be paused at this time, I ask that you request from APS a boundary proposal that keeps McKinley students together at Reed. We are confident that our entire school community can fit at the new building and believe this will promote stability for our students at a difficult time. At the same time, moving all of
I'm
us
very
to Reed
sorry,
offers
but
APS
the time has expired, but we do welcome you to email us any comments that you have so we can hear your whole prepared remarks. Thank you. Next speaker.
Next is Sheila Kelly.
Good evening, and thank you. I'm Sheila Kelly, and I'm speaking on Return to School. I'm the parent of 2 APS middle school students. While I am dismayed at Arlington's failure to open schools for in-person learning, we now have the benefit of data from districts that have opened schools safely. Testing across New York City's public schools this week have shown, quote, remarkable results. Only 28 positive tests in more than 16,000 test results, a 0.17% positivity rating across all open schools. Doctors in emergency rooms have a lower positivity rate than the general population. Clearly, following safety protocols will drastically minimize risks. But there are risks we do not seem to consider. Of approximately 60 APS parents of middle and high school students with whom I have talked in the past 2 weeks, only 1 reports that her child is doing well with distance learning. The remainder shared alarming stories of adverse mental health effects, including depression, suicidal thoughts, apathy, and withdrawal. So I would like to ask the school board, what are APS's metrics for educational, social, emotional, and abuse risks to students? Are these risks any less real or profound? People keep talking about opening schools, quote, when it is safe. but no one seems to be considering whether keeping schools closed is making things less safe for our children due to the adverse mental health impacts of isolation. Has APS consulted with any APS psychologists or guidance counselors to understand the impact of distance learning on our students? The data clearly showed that schools can be opened with negligible positivity rates with proper precautions and testing, like New York City has done. Our teachers deserve to feel safe with these precautions. What we need is leadership among the school board that in-person school is vitally important. Schools have opened across our county, country, and the world with great success. Please, let's together start following the very encouraging data and open our schools now for all students who want or need it, middle and high school included. Let's stop moving goalposts and pushing back timelines. We need to treat this like the urgent priority it is and open all our schools, middle and high school, now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for calling in and sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Lisa Richmond Kelly.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Richmond, and I'm calling on return to school options. I'm the mother of 3 amazing children, all of whom attend Barrett Elementary School, and I've been a proud Arlington resident for over 20 years. One of the reasons I chose to move to Arlington and that I choose to stay here is our community and our phenomenal schools. It is heartbreaking to hear from many teachers and staff at the October 8th school board meeting who expressed their concerns that our school board and community are not appropriately taking into consideration their health and safety concerns in developing our return to school plans. I applaud those teachers and staff for their bravery in speaking up. We must do a better job making our teachers and staff feel that their voices are being heard and considered in this process. I acknowledge that notwithstanding the extraordinary lengths to which our teachers and staff have gone to make virtual education as enriching as possible, it cannot compare to the education our children receive in person. However, we must do a better job now and in the future in ensuring that our frontline workers, our beloved teachers and staff, know that they have our full support and that we will all work together to accomplish and implement the best possible solution for everyone under the circumstances. This solution can and will only be effective if our teachers and staff have confidence and trust that we are making their health and safety one of the priorities in our planning. I thank the school board for this opportunity to express my views and send my gratitude to the teachers and staff at Barrett Elementary and all schools across Arlington County for all they're doing in partnership with our families to educate, nurture, and support our children.
And thank you for calling in. Next speaker.
Next is Angie Kramer.
My name is Angie Kramer. This outpouring of organizing from some parents purportedly on behalf of the marginalized always starts with the phrase, my children. My children cannot learn virtually, so we must all go back to school now. I'm here to say that APS's virtual model is successful for many families, including my own, and it should be strengthened to work for most rather than dismissed entirely. The APS return to school plan doesn't feel safe to many right now, not just teachers and staff. Many first responders' kids aren't returning to school because their parents cannot quarantine for 2 weeks if need be. Many low-income people can't return because financially they can't quarantine either, and they have no safety net or insurance if they get sick. Many children of color are not returning because they and their parents are at the most risk of serious complications for COVID-19, including death. Appallingly, those students who cannot return, including the immunocompromised, may be stuck in larger virtual classes with teachers who may not even have taught their grade before. Virtual teachers will have to manage these large class sizes without assistance since they will be assigned to the hybrid program. To add insult to injury, hybrid's 2 days of virtual education will have, by design, much smaller class sizes with students you know and a familiar grade level teacher. How is any of this fair or equitable to the virtual community? I want to end my remarks to applaud our teachers and staff. We see you. Despite what some people say, you are doing your job and well. We see how tired you are. We see Canvas assignments and grading happening all throughout the evening and into night. You are working harder than you ever have, learned a new way of learning within weeks, and are doing the best you can to keep our children engaged under the most difficult of circumstances. We need you more than you need us. Know that there is a large parent contingent who will fight to keep in your family, keep you and your family safe. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for calling in. Next speaker.
Next, we have Bill Van Avera.
My name is Bill Van Evera, and I've taught science in Arlington for 25 years. To those urging us to repopulate the buildings, I have not heard a single one of you speak about a need that is not important. We get it. In spite of working many 12-plus hour days, I know that virtual instruction will never replace the pre-pandemic school experience. Virtual instruction is necessary because it robs the disease of transmission pathways and it protects all of us in our community. There are people who are alive today as a result of the sacrifices that we continue to make. Now, it is true that at least 60% of teachers are deeply concerned with safety, and it is true that OSHA provides for a workplace that is free from recognized hazards, including disease. We hope that will be honored. But the picture is broader than that. We are living through a global pandemic under a declared state of emergency. Every month we learn something new. The disease spreads as an aerosol with very brief contact, the CDC said just this week, as many speakers have previously pointed out this evening. Any plan to move forward under the numbers presented must minimally include the following: basic workplace safety, hazards that will not create predictable transmission vectors. We need a plan that does not put groups of maskless people in enclosed indoor spaces at lunch or breakfast. There must be testing, tracing, and transparency of anonymous case numbers within Arlington Public Schools, and there must be protections that are appropriate for people who work in high-risk environments. We need to continue to work together as a staff and as a county to find a way forward that does not strip teachers and staff members of their ability to make their own judgments of safety. We must not compare to European countries or states that hide their numbers, and we must not become short-sighted. And we must not allow our school system to become a community vector of COVID-19 that has happened in so many other places. We must continue to protect our students, their families, and our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Ingrid Gant.
Good evening. My name is Ingrid Gant. I am the current president of the Arlington Education Association. But today I'm speaking as an individual. Today I'm speaking and to remind all of us who have spoken that everything is possible. Returning to schools are possible, just not right now. I want to remind us that contrary to what you may believe, teachers are not being chosen over the needs of our students. I repeat, our teachers, our educators are not being chosen over the needs of our students. Returning to school, there's possible, just not right now. I am concerned that putting our staff and students at risk may be chosen, and it looks like it may even happen very soon. I am concerned that regardless of the countless hours of meetings and talks that I've had with our board, with our superintendent, with the executive leadership team, it seems like we're failing our educators. And I know that returning to schools are possible, just not right now. We have had people die in Arlington County. We have had people die in Alexandria. Look at the schools in Virginia. All parents, all students, all educators. Who's open? Who's opening? They've already made the decision. I urge the people that have been elected, the people that I give most credit to, Dr. Duran, you've been amazing. I urge you to make the call. Choose your staff, choose your students, choose your community over returning us to school. It is not safe. It is not the right thing to do. We're pitting our principals against our educators by having them call parents and urge them to bring their kids to school. We're pitting our teachers against our parapros by saying, you're going back in, but I'm staying home. We're just changing geography. Returning to school.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gant. Please feel free to send us your comments in writing. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Sharon Purdy.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Purdy. My husband Michael and I have 3 children at McKinley. I dialed in tonight to voice my concerns regarding the proposed elementary school boundary plans. We believe the plan falls well short of APS's stated goals to address overcapacity and to keep school communities together.
We live in one of the 3 planning units that moves our children from McKinley to Glebe under the current plan. The most pressing and egregious issue is that Glebe will be at 128% capacity and is 2 to 3 times further away, while Reed, our community walkable school, is sitting at 87% capacity. Given the principles that are stated to guide APS's school boundary decision, this is a poor outcome, even absent a pandemic. Further disheartening is the inequality that the plan promotes. Of the 7 schools whose boundaries are up for consideration at this time, Glebe and Ashland will be disproportionately affected by overcapacity as a result of this plan. Of these 7 schools, Glebe and Ashland also have the highest percentage of low-income housing relative to schools like Tuckahoe, Nottingham, Discovery, which are all well under capacity and have a very small percentage of low-income households. Glebe and Ashland are thus in the most need of protection from further overcrowding, not moves that would increase their existing overcrowding. Taken together, one unfortunate consequence of a limited boundary process may be discrimination, not just economic, but also racial, ethnic, and language discrimination. We believe that APS is fully capable of making boundary decisions, which will have a positive impact countywide, but we feel this process has been rushed. Undoubtedly, APS staff are exhausted and overwhelmed by the effort needed to implement the hybrid plan. Now, the last-minute decision to downscope this process to only 7 schools leads to the inability to address localized overcrowding without a more holistic approach. For the sake of Arlington's youngest and most vulnerable learners, we urge you to limit the number of changes to our communities as possible, which will create greater flexibility for you down the road. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Erin Neal.
Hi, I'm reading this statement on behalf of 2 other Arlington parents who were not able or comfortable with sharing their stories publicly tonight. From an APS parent of 3, I see that APS has once again pushed back the target date for return to school. I have a 5th grader with an IEP and 2 3rd graders, one of whom just qualified for an IEP. I spent most of this week in parent-teacher conferences hearing how behind my children are, how they are not able to work independently, not turning in their assignments. I am told the basic reason for this is they are not able to read proficiently. APS shut down 2nd grade early this year when my kids were receiving reading intervention. You made the choice to stop all interventions in the spring and effectively ended school for 2nd grade and under. You also shut down the IEP evaluation process. They are now in 3rd grade and cannot read proficiently. Distance learning does not work when you cannot read well. It is the school system's obligation to teach them, and you are failing at this. Governor Northam allowed for students with IEPs to return to school in Phase 1 and students 3rd grade and under in Phase 2. We are now in Phase 3, and yet none of my kids are back in school. And now you don't plan to return my 3rd grader with an IEP until January? Members of the school board, you must stand up against this plan. If you intend to push back returning 3rd to 5th graders until January, you need to return students who are not reading proficiently and students with IEPs much sooner. Next week would be ideal. The first week in November, marginally acceptable. From a single parent of 2. After this spring's disastrous remote learning experience and your last-minute decision to not provide in-person education this fall, I knew my children had to leave APS in order to learn. You're establishing district policies in response to fuel-filled anecdotes and unfounded prophecies from the Teachers Association and the parents they've whipped into a fear-based frenzy. I hope you'll start listening to the overwhelming evidence that reopening schools would benefit students in terms of academic attainment, mental health, and even lifelong earnings. I hope you'll step outside the closed-minded and
Thank you very much. I appreciate you calling in. We'd be happy to hear the rest of your comments and read them if you're able to send them to our school.board at apsva.us site. Thank you. Next speaker.
Next, we have Melissa Dario.
Hi, my name is Melissa Dario, and I'm speaking on return to school. I know none of us signed up to navigate education during the pandemic, and I do recognize all the hard work you all are doing in a constantly changing landscape. I have a 5th grade daughter at Discovery Elementary. Changing her teacher halfway into the school year will cause her such trauma, shattering the progress she's made as a result of the relationship she's built with her teachers. Our teachers have worked so hard to build relationships with their students virtually. APS needs to focus on virtual, making this platform even better. Teachers need the support to do this. Even hybrid students are going to be virtual 2 days a week. APS has made equity such a focus, yet with the shift to hybrid, there are potentially larger and mixed-grade virtual classes. That is a prime example of where virtual students will be marginalized, and that is not equitable. If class sizes go down for hybrid, they also need to go down for virtual. In addition, forcing teachers and staff to go back in order to keep their jobs, even when they don't feel safe, is not okay. We cannot move forward until the safety and health of our students and staff come first. With no true COVID testing plan and insufficient contact tracing plans, this puts our entire community at an additional risk for a COVID increase. This would lead to shutting APS down again, putting our teachers and students further behind in working together to navigate learning. I plead with you to hit pause and take time to really deliver a better plan, both for hybrid and virtual. I truly feel that as focus shifts towards the transition to hybrid, virtual is becoming an afterthought. This needs to take all stakeholders, teachers and staff included, into account in order to truly provide equity for our community. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker.
Next, we have Susie Manzana.
Good evening. My name is Susie Menazza, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of a group of key school families who live in Woodbury Park. Built in the 1940s, Woodbury Park is an apartment community with 204 affordable units and 160 market rate units within walking distance of the metro, jobs, and the current K Elementary School. More than 100 K-5 children live in Woodbury Park, and about 70% of them attend the Spanish Immersion School, which is a 10-minute walk from their homes. But in the current boundary process, the planning unit that includes Woodbury Park has been assigned to Arlington Science Focus, not to the new school at the key site. Woodbury Park families now face the choice between Arlington Science Focus and the Spanish Immersion program at the IPS building. Unfortunately, both choices severely penalize the low-income families from Woodbury Park, many of which do not own private vehicles. If they choose Arlington Science Focus and a school bus will be available, something unclear at the moment as the map indicates Woodbury Park as a walkable zone, parents of students attending extended day will have to walk 25 minutes to pick up their children or take 2 public buses. If they choose ski immersion at the ATS building, they face 2 problems. Despite about 70 kids in the immersion program, the closest hop stop has been placed about 0.7 miles away. There's no direct public transportation to and from the ATS building, which makes picking up children from extended day almost impossible for parents who work and don't have cars. The families I represent overwhelmingly want to continue with the immersion program. In light of APS's commitment to fairness, equity, and inclusion, they would like the superintendent and the school board to consider 2 requests. First, to adjust the hot stops so the one is closer to the large Woodbury Park community. Second, to reassign the Woodbury Park planning unit to the new school at the key site to make it easier for the low-income families unable to follow the immersion program to APS to walk to their assigned school. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Alexandra Kozel.
Good evening. My name is Alexandra Kozel, and I'm speaking about the proposed changes to the 2020-21 school year. I believe that there is a large case of COVID fatigue that we are all feeling. We are tired of dealing with the virus. Parents, teachers, the entire community. But the fact of the matter is, the virus is not tired of dealing with us. It is alive, it is well, and it is spreading, as shown by the most recent data that shows cases in Arlington returning to the same rate they had over the summer. As we go into the cold and flu season and the holidays approaching, it is my opinion that logistically it is impossible for our students to return before the new year, if then. It is creating an undue burden of stress on our families, students, teachers, staff members, and administration to have these set dates for going back that are goalposts that will be moved as we do not meet the metrics. And to be clear, the current data trajectory shows that we will not meet the metrics soon.
What we need to do is make virtual better. We have the technology. We have spent millions of dollars to have iPads and Chromebooks in every child's hands, and they have amazing accessibility features. Did you know that the iPad can read aloud the text to speech, or can do dictation for speech to text? We can provide more differentiation for our students with IEPs and ELs. We can provide more support to our teachers by creating cross-county Google Drives for each grade level where we can share resources so we are not starting planning every activity from scratch every day. But beyond that, I know as a special
Thank you very much for
teacher
calling in, and I'm
that we
very
can
sorry,
always-
but you're actually out of time. So if you would like to email the rest of your remarks, we'd be happy to look at them. Thank you. Next speaker.
Our final speaker tonight is Mr. Jeff Martin.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Martin. I'm a community member and the husband of an APS teacher. I signed up to speak today to make a simple request. Dr. Duran, please do not kill my wife. Please don't do it. Please do not send her back into a workplace that threatens to end her life or, if not that, cause permanent damage to her heart, lungs, and brain, disabling her for the rest of her life. I wish I were speaking hyperbolically. I wish I were exaggerating. I am not. Anyone who's paying a modicum of attention knows we're rounding the corner on 250,000 dead in the U.S. That doesn't even count the millions who have survived but suffered heart damage, lung damage, debilitating strokes, or months and months of persistent illness. Just because you lived through COVID doesn't mean you go on to have a full life. And yes, my wife may survive getting COVID in one of your schools, but someone's wife won't, someone's mother won't, someone's father won't. How do you feel about orphaning Arlington children, leaving Arlington residents widowed because of decisions that you made? Can you live with yourself knowing you caused people's deaths? Do you really imagine you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that children will never again be able to see or hug or kiss their parents because your actions killed them? Dr. Duran, if you open schools up and you force teachers back in who don't want to go, you will forever have a stain on your record. You will be the superintendent who killed your staff. You don't have to be that person. You have two options before you, the one that leads to people dying and the one that doesn't. Personally, I'm confused about why you're struggling to choose between those two options. Make the right choice. Choose to not kill teachers. Stay with virtual. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for calling in as well. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, and we do appreciate you taking the time to share your comments and concerns with us. We are now at our recognition of Bullying Prevention Month. Dr. Duran, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. I'd like to ask Assistant Superintendent Bridget Loft, who will be introducing staff to provide some information on this very important topic. Ms. Loft. Ms. Loft, go ahead.
I'm not sure. Could you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now, Ms. Loft. Thank you.
Sure, I apologize. So I'd like to introduce Heather Davis, who is our Coordinator of Counseling Services, and she will be sharing this presentation with the board.
Thank you, Bridget. Good evening, school board members, Dr. Duran, the executive leadership team, and all those joining us tonight. Tonight's recognition highlights bullying prevention at the elementary school level. I hope everyone will have an opportunity to view the video produced by AETV last year that will be running on the APS website, which more extensively covers our bullying prevention efforts across K-12. Thank you very much. And you can play the slideshow now.
Ms. Davis, we don't. The slideshow has not been provided. So if you want to just provide a little bit more closing comments on and we'll make sure to get that posted. But if you could just provide a few more closing comments on maybe what was there and any final words on this Bullying Prevention Month. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Absolutely. I'm pulling it up on my side right now. So every October, students in grades K through 5 receive lessons in their classroom provided by school counselors who at times collaborate also with PE teachers or other staff in the building. Students actually learn both assertiveness skills and empathy skills prior to learning bullying prevention. And this is so they can use assertive voice, which is a calm, confident, respectful voice to report bullying when necessary, and empathy so that they can use their skills to recognize how others are feeling, put themselves in someone else's shoes, so that they can be the best bystanders and upstanders for their classmates. Students across K-5 learn safety rules starting in the younger grades, and then work on the 3 R's of bullying prevention, which are recognizing bullying, reporting bullying, and refusing bullying. In the upper grades, 4th and 5th graders also receive instruction on bystander power and responsibility, and also cyberbullying. This year in particular, school counselors at the elementary level are incorporating digital citizenship and online etiquette in order to respond to the current needs of our students and ensure that even in a virtual environment, we have a safe and respectful school climate. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. We do appreciate your presentation. Are there any questions from Ms. Davis' colleagues? I do not believe so, Ms. Davis, but we do appreciate your work on this, and thank you for the presentation. And we want to thank the Department of Student Services, our school counselors, and all APS staff members who support efforts to keep all of our students safe.
Sorry, Monique, this is Reed. I do have a question. I had my hand up, but
I do apologize, Mr. Goldstein.
You can't see me.
Then I would be happy to recognize you to ask a question. We're having a little trouble seeing the presentation in the boardroom, so I was unable to recognize your hand was up. But thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Heather, thank you for the presentation. So I have 2 questions, and the first is, how long has this bullying prevention program been in effect?
The current evidence-based curriculum that we use through Second Step, this is the 4th year that we're using that curriculum in particular. And I actually started with APS 4 years ago, so I can't speak to what was in place before that, but this one has been 4 years.
Okay, thanks. And my second question is, what results do you see from that, and what are the metrics that you're using to understand the results?
So we look at both pre and post data when it comes to student understanding, student kind of understanding what is recognizing bullying. When it comes to actually the reports, that's more data that's collected school by school for bullying reports that are put into place. I don't have those numbers at the moment with me, but I can say that I know multiple school counselors that have used bullying prevention programs as part of their whole child goals and SMART goals with their management plan with their principals, and seen positive results in terms of, actually that would mean reports going down, less reports at the school level.
But it's not just reports, right, that you're using as a performance outcome? It's also what did you say about the pre and post?
Yeah, so just general knowledge, skills, and attitudes of the students. Do they feel safe in their school buildings? Do they understand what bullying is? So kind of the amount of students who are reporting bullying versus maybe speaking up for a friend or for someone who's maybe in a bad situation, things like that.
And how do you measure that?
Both student reporting, teacher reporting, sometimes needs assessments that include parent information as well in terms of what's their perception of the school climate. It's a variety of data points.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any other colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move along. Again, thank you very much, Ms. Davis, for your presentation today. We are now at announcements. On October 27th, the board will hold a virtual work session on the instructional program Pathways at 6 p.m. On October 29th, we will have a virtual closed meeting at 5:15 p.m. Also on the 29th, we will have a virtual work session on elementary boundaries at 6:30 p.m. And November 2nd, there will be a virtual policy subcommittee meeting at 2 p.m. I would also like to announce that Red Ribbon Week begins tomorrow. Since 1985, the Red Ribbon Week campaign has supported communities and families in nurturing the full potential of healthy, drug-free youth. This year, the theme for Red Ribbon Week is Be Happy, Be Brave, Be Drug-Free, and confirms the Red Ribbon mission to help all children, families, and communities live healthy, happy, drug-free lives. We encourage you to recognize Red Ribbon Week as an opportunity to talk with your children about the dangers of drug use and abuse so they can live lives that are happy, brave, and drug-free. At this time, I'd like to invite my school board colleagues to make announcements if they have any. I'd like to start with Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein, do you have any announcements today?
I do, thank you. I have some announcements from 3 of my liaison schools. The first is Barcroft Elementary School. The Barcroft PTA, along with the Communities in Schools organization, has started a new supplemental food program for Barcroft families in need. About 90 families have signed up for the Weekend Bags program, which provides a bag of pantry staples along with a backpack that can be used to carry the food home each week. Food is distributed each Friday between 11 and 1 so that families can receive the food at the same time that they pick up APS lunches at the school in the Grab and Go program. The Barcroft PTA is thankful for donations received in recent weeks from Trader Joe's and also from Discovery Elementary School PTA. Program organizers would like to extend an invitation to any interested school board members to stop by Barcroft on a Friday during lunch to see the Weekend Bags program in action. At Arlington Science Focus, the school news team will interview Superintendent Dr. Duran on October 28th and air that interview on October 29th. They're very excited to get to know a little about his years in school and some of his favorite books. The Hanover organization will work at Science Focus on November 3rd as their community service to help do weeding and some painting. And finally, at Arlington Traditional School, during Hispanic Heritage Month, Arlington Traditional at their school-wide weekly assemblies showcased and honored local Hispanic artist David Amoroso, who shows his admiration for Latin culture through his artwork, and all ATS Hispanic staff members shared their love of their native country. And those are my announcements for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Ms. Van Dorn, any announcements?
I do not have announcements. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Talento?
No, I do not have any announcements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Dr. Cannonen, any announcements?
Yes, thank you, Ms. O'Grady. I have 2 announcements this evening. First, I want to tell you all how we are doing with the census. And for those who have been following us, you know that we've been active in Arlington Public Schools working with our county's Complete Count Committee. Thanks very much to our Social Studies Supervisor, Carrie Hirsch, and our Assistant Superintendent for School and Community Relations, Catherine Ashby. They did terrific work making sure that across Arlington Public Schools, our students and families were aware of the census and understood the importance of responding. Our friend on the county board side, Katie Crystal, was the liaison, the county board liaison, and I served as the school board liaison. She announced recently that the census has now ended. People responded self-reported, and then there was an extensive canvassing effort to go door to door to get the rest of the responses. And are you ready for this? We know our response rate in Arlington. It is 99.98%. So congratulations to Arlington. That's pretty amazing. My second announcement is also amazing. I just want to congratulate our superintendent, Dr. Duran. He was elected president of the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. Congratulations, Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Dr. Cannonen.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon, and congratulations, Dr. Duran, and congratulations to Arlingtonians for being counted during the census. I do have one announcement from one of my liaison schools, and I'd like to share that Gunston Middle School, in partnership with National Landing Bid and Fresh Farm, the PTA there is providing bags of fresh produce to 120 families weekly. 50 bags are delivered directly to families at their homes by Gunston Middle School PTA volunteers, and the remaining 70 are picked up by families at a distribution location. Hoffman, Boston, Oak Ridge, and Wakefield PTAs are likewise organizing produce distribution to families at their schools through this program. And we appreciate the supporters of the program, and there's a long list of them. Some of them are corporate sponsors. We want to thank them for helping to ensure that our families have access to fresh produce, and we want to thank all of the PTA volunteers at all of those schools for supporting our families. Thank you. That's all of the announcements that we have from the board members. Now I'd like to provide an update on communications. Since our last meeting on October 8th, the school board has received input related to the phased return to hybrid in-person learning plan from teachers, staff, and parents. Please be rest assured that the board and the superintendent are reviewing emails and receive a weekly report of messages received. We have also received messages on the full-time distance learning model, the fall 2020 elementary school boundary process, the network outage on Wednesday, and school resource officers. We encourage you to submit questions related to full-time distance learning and the reopening of schools to Engage via the online form, or email them to us at engage@apsva.us. Please be patient. As the volume of messages are very high, it may take staff some time to respond. We appreciate the community's involvement as staff continues to work through plans for the school year. Updates and new information are shared with Dr. Duran via School Talk every Tuesday. That's every Tuesday, and at board meetings under the monitoring agenda item. I'd also like to announce that the board is accepting applications for the Advisory Council on Teaching and Learning, the Budget Advisory Council, and the Aquatics Committee, as well as applications to serve on the work group that will be looking at our school resource officers. Please visit our website to learn more about these committees and how to apply. Finally, school board members continue to host virtual open office hours on Monday, October the 26th. Ms. Van Dorn will hold open office hours from 5 to 7 p.m. Information on signing up to meet with her will be shared via School Talk and posted on the APS homepage on Friday afternoon. Again, we appreciate the community's engagement, especially during these unprecedented times. Dr. Duran, do you have any announcements to make?
Yes, thank you, Chair O'Grady. And a few brief announcements tonight. And as a reminder, any updates and information I'll be presenting on return to school plan will be later in this meeting as a part of the monitoring report. Before I begin my announcements, I want to thank all of the individuals who called in and spoke today, both about the boundary process and also about our return to school plan. I really appreciate hearing everyone's concerns, and I want to echo a lot of what I heard in terms of how we're all in this together. We all want the same thing. We all want our students to learn and thrive and be successful. We all want our staff to thrive, be successful, and be safe as well. And thinking about that, people are coming from different perspectives. There's a lot of strong feelings about how do we proceed. There's a lot of different opinions. But I hope that the one opinion and the strong feeling we can all continue to hold true to is the notion that we've got to stay together and not become divided. It's very difficult to do in this time as, again, people strongly feel one way or another about how we proceed. COVID-19 has really taken a physical toll on our community, for the many members of our community who've been infected or who have dealt with family and friends who have been infected. But now we cannot allow it to continue to take another toll on our school community. And I know that's easier said than done. And I know that no matter what I might say or others might say, it's going to continue to have stress and fear and concern on whatever side you are with how we move forward. But comments about parents wanting the best for their children or staff wanting to do the very best are not helping us to move forward. So how can we focus on the issue at hand and the concern of the issue that we have to move forward? That's what I'm asking everyone. And I know I've received a lot of positive feedback and a lot of negative feedback, a lot of criticism directly, personally to me, and I understand where that's coming from, and I, as superintendent, take the responsibility to receive those criticism and those thanks and gratitude, but I do not want that same criticism against our staff members. So please, if people are concerned and have questions, I welcome that, but I also want you to please direct those to me and to the superintendent. Comments that our teachers need to work. They're working more than unbelievable amount of time, and the things that they have done to create a virtual environment is second to none. And I talk to superintendents around the country and the Commonwealth, and to see what our teachers have done is just amazing. It blows my mind to know and imagine. I'm so grateful for that. And I know that some of the comments directed at that is out of a feeling of fear and anxiety and concern for wanting students back in school, but that we can't do that. We cannot have those comments directed at our community. That's not something that I want for us, and I don't think that's what anyone wants for our community. So let's try, even in our own division and in our own difference of opinion and in our own strong opinion of where we are, to see how we can respect and listen and understand each other in a way to best move forward. This is not easy. I don't have all the right answers. We don't know all the right steps that we need to move forward. And I'm willing to listen and learn, and that's what I've been doing, and that's what we're all doing in our personal lives and now in our educating of our students and supporting our staff. So I just hope that we can rise up on that and continue to be the community that I know we are, the community that I wanted to join 5 months ago, and the community that I'm proud to lead. Very, very proud of APS, but I'm also concerned to hear and see the comments and the things that are happening. So just wanted, before I start, pause and say that. And I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding, and just know that we're all wanting the very best, and how we approach what that looks like might be different based on our circumstance. But it doesn't make our parents or our teachers or our staff bad people, or people who are trying to do harm, or people who are trying to not want to educate, or people who don't want to be in school, or people who only want. That's not who we are. So let's not be that community. I know that's not who we are, and I know that's not what we will be. So thank you for that. Just allow me a few moments to reflect on that. I also want to, acknowledge and recognize that this week, in the midst of all that and everything we're navigating, our internet service provider notified us that they had a major damage to a fiber optic cable in Vienna. And that took us through another situation where we had to pause on Wednesday to restore connection and get instruction up and learning. So I do apologize for that. Again, in the middle of everything, yet one other thing came our way with our internet service provider. On to a few announcements. I really would like to thank Courtney Weber, who is one of our parents in APS, 2 students, for taking the initiative and bringing forward Project Headphones to help us raise money to purchase headphones for our low-income students and those who just may need headphones to help them complete their work. These headphones really have been a plus and are an added blessing to many students and families when they have particularly multiple learners in the home, and there's a lot going on and need to be able to hear and communicate with their teacher without any distraction. And it was so wonderful, and this is what I was referring to a minute ago, the overwhelming support of the Arlington community and some of our partners like Amazon. We raised $110,000 to purchase headphones, which amounted to 12,000 headphones for our family. 8,000 of those have already been delivered to schools, and they'll be distributing them soon if they've not already done so. Families who would like to receive headphones so their child is able to use them should contact their child's school. So thank you, Courtney, for being a leader in our community, for rising up, and for bringing us together in one way. I appreciate that, and I know so many of our families will be very appreciative and thankful, and our students, to have this added tool. Thank you so much. I want to recognize Claremont Immersion Elementary School second grade teacher Andrea Fitch, who was named Educator of the Year as part of the Canvas Educator of the Year Awards in connection with the Canvas Con Online EdTech Conference. And the 2020 Canvas Educator of the Year Awards were something that is put in place to recognize outstanding educators across the United States who are working to embrace remote learning, prepare students for the workforce, and support student achievement and success. And in response to winning the award, Ms. Fitch said, people, quote, people often think you can't teach little ones at a distance, end quote. And Ms. Fitch, like so many of our amazing teachers in APS, has been proving people wrong in that. She's embraced the challenge of distance learning. She's empowering and helping her students for a changing world. And as she talked about, it doesn't matter how many that her students are second graders, whether they're English learners, she's working through many ways to face various challenges and inequities that they may have at home, and always helping to make them move forward and grow and learn, and instilling that growth mindset in her students, academically challenging them and believing in them, even from a distance. And so I'm really appreciative, and I want to acknowledge her. And having taught in her native country of Peru before arriving in the United States and starting her career as an educator, she has a strong foundation to educate our students from all the background and experiences she had. So congratulations, Ms. Fitch, for winning this award and representing all of the APS educators in this award who have been doing all that they can to support our students through distance learning. We honor you tonight. Thank you so much. I want to make sure that our community knows that the 2021 school year calendar survey is currently open until Friday, October 30th, so a week from tomorrow. This survey is allowing the opportunity for all families and staff to really input on the calendar for next school year. Give us some input on what you see. The proposed calendar will be coming before the board as an info item at the November 17th meeting and then action on December 3rd. The new timeline for approving this calendar will allow us to be much earlier than in the past and give families and communities more information on what to expect for the upcoming year, as it's adopted December and then does not go into effect to the next school year. The major change you'll see to the draft calendar is that the proposal is to start a week earlier, providing some very important recognition of holidays, religious holidays for our community, and also recognizing Indigenous People Day as an important day for us to recognize. So we do want to hear your input, so please review the calendar online and complete the survey by next Friday. The Virginia Preschool Initiative, or as we call it, VPI, has many openings still at some of our neighborhood elementary school. It is a pre-K program free for eligible families, and want to encourage any family members who are interested to take a look at that. There are some requirements that you turn 4 by the age of 4 years old by September 30th, 2020, that the household income is federal poverty guidelines, and also that the family might be receiving federal benefits, including unemployment, so that's another opportunity. Families who may have been impacted by the current COVID-19 circumstances can be eligible also for a waiver to enroll for this school year. So if you have any information, there's the phone number you can see on this slide, and also a website where you can get more information. And staff is certainly there to help you as well if you want to seek information, and then also help you with the application process and complete the online application. So please reach out. This wonderful opportunity, particularly with the waiver for this year for families who may not have previously qualified. As I've mentioned, I think a couple of times now, we have our annual online verification process that is also due by next Friday, the 30th. And this is something that's very important because it replaces all of our printed packets that we have. And it is also important because families in completing this will provide us the most recent contact information, so that we can have that in our student information system. And that way schools and the APS as a whole are better able to communicate and contact you about important information, particularly updates that may be occurring. So as of right now, we have 63%, which is good, but we still have a ways to go by next Friday. If you have any families that you know of, or if you are a family that has not completed this and you need assistance, contact your child's school. Staff are available to assist remotely. And if you've not completed your AVOP yet, please make sure you do that. We will send a final reminder, and we will be working with families directly who have not yet completed that next week. A couple of important information about some upcoming nights that are happening. Families of rising 6th and rising 9th graders are encouraged to attend our information nights to learn more about the transition to middle and high school. And of course, due to COVID-19, these are virtual. Each school will host a virtual information session that can provide you more information that you might be curious about, particularly if you've not been a family who's had a child in middle or high school. These are really important. And even if you have, there may be some new updates on things. Middle school information night is this coming Monday from 7 to 8. High school coming up after that, November 2nd from 7 to 8. And during these nights, you'll be able to hear an overview about the school itself, school options, some application deadlines and procedures, also learning about some resources that are available. So the link to watch the information nights is also available at this link here and that you see on the bottom of the screen. And reminders to watch the information nights will be sent to families the day of the events. So hopefully you'll partake and learn more about middle and high school. I also would like to remind families of the following important dates. Tomorrow, October 23rd, is no school for elementary and middle school students. It's for parent-teacher conferences. Next week, October 27th, 28th, are pre-service days for our Level 1 and Level 2, which is elementary and CTE staff. And this is to help them provide additional professional learning for staff returning in person, but also for staff who are remaining in virtual to continue to support our virtual instruction. As it was shared some of the speakers tonight, I want to reiterate that as we think about returning to learn, it's not that we're not developing and continuing to support our virtual environment. We need to continue, and we will continue to do that. And so this is just for elementary and CTE students and families on those 2 days, the 27th and 28th. They will be asynchronous learning days. Middle and high school students will not be affected until later, sometime probably in December, when we'll have days available for them. But next week is just elementary and CTE students. And then November 3rd, Election Day, there are no school for all students, and that's a grade preparation day for our staff and teachers. Open enrollment for all APS employees continues through November 6th, and all benefits eligible employees can add insurance, change coverage. There will also be multiple virtual health vendor sessions each week, so take advantage of that and look at that so that you might be interested in changes to your benefits. Staff are also able to receive a free flu shot through our EAP assistance program during this time of open enrollment. We're encouraging everyone who's able to do so to get one. And so if you have any information on that, you can see the schedule here, and please reach out or look onto Staff Central page. And now to close out the announcements is just a brief update, as we'll always do, on the school board action plan that you see here. So 2 items from there I'd like to provide updates on. This week, staff completed the final 5 of virtual community events around elementary school boundary process, and also closed the community questionnaire where we were seeking input on the initial boundary proposal. We had a very strong participation, and I want to thank the community for that. We had 700 participants for the 5 virtual sessions and 1,100 responses to the questionnaire. We also thank staff because they also handed out in 5 different languages at our meal sites and had a multilingual voice messaging system, so we got input from those family members who were not able to communicate only in English. I want to encourage the school community to know that this coming week we will have more information about this at our October 29th work session on the boundary process, and the planning team will also share what we've heard from the community input and how it is being used, so that we're making some refinements to our initial proposal based on the feedback that we've heard. And then ultimately on November 5th, I will present the recommendations to the board on my recommendations on the boundary process for this year, so that the board can take action in December. And the last bit connected to our action plan is our school resource officer work group. As you know, we are in the process of beginning to look at that. We're forming a 48-member work group to work with staff and gathering community feedback and recommendations. We have received several applications thus far, but the application process is still open, and it is open through November 9th. It is available in 5 languages, and we encourage you or anyone you may know who might be interested in this to make sure that they apply so that we can have a strong representation and a variety of perspectives. In addition to the work group, all community members will be invited to share comments at our public hearing that will be held in January on this issue. And of course, we have set up an Engage page, so you can also share any comments you have now or questions to engage@apsva.us. Thank you, Madam Chair, and my fellow school board members for these announcements and for all of us really coming together during these difficult times. These are very, very challenging times, and I appreciate all the support from you as school board members and from our community as we do our very, very best to make sure that we're doing all we can for our staff and our students. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Duran, for your announcements and your comments that preface the presentation. With that, I'd like to go to my colleagues to see if there are any questions regarding your presentation. I'll start with Ms. Van Dorn. Ms. Van Dorn, questions or comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, though you're a little scratchy, but let's keep trying to see if it'll work.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. And I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Duran for his initial comments. I know that we're in a very difficult time, and I think we all are very stressed. And I appreciate the call to be caring for each other. And I also wanted to thank you and the entire leadership team of APS for talking with and listening to our families as well as our teachers, and to incorporate and evolve your plan with their feedback. I think it's become very clear that you are doing that. And I just wanted to say thank you. And thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here. And thank you very, very much for leading us with such heart in these very difficult times. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Dorn. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Van Dorn. Ms. Talento?
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. I don't have any questions. I thank you for providing us an update on the AOVP. And I know that our staff have been following up with parents to try to get them registered, because I've heard of parents who say, oh yeah, I've got a staff call and I'm going to meet with them. So I want to just thank you all for making sure that that's happening, because our parents are starting to understand that this is where they're going to be able to access information for their students. And so thank you and your staff for pushing that through. And I really would like to echo Ms. Van Doren's remarks on thank you, Dr. Duran, for your leadership through these very difficult times. I know that all of us have been working hard on the board, ELT, yourself, and our teachers. I actually have the privilege of helping a VPI student, a family friend, and I get to see what her teachers do every day when I am hosting her and being the parent that day or the babysitter. And it is extraordinary what the team, and I just want to respect the privacy of the student and the teachers, but the VPI team that I witness 3 to 4 times a week, it is absolutely incredible. And they wake up every morning and put everything that they're carrying every day aside, and they say, good morning, friends. You know, and you see them just animated and learning about their letters and their numbers. And then you have the PE teacher come in and they say, okay, get up, and it's happening. In my home, you're seeing it, 4-year-olds in VPI. These are our low-income students, and it's working. And is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. And do you see VPI students who have other siblings learning alongside them and teachers saying, well, can you move to another room, or can we work through that? And you know what? We're working as a community, and every day there's learning and growing. And I know that this is just a small window into what's happening all over Arlington. And so I just want to give kudos again to our staff, to that very special VPI team that I get to witness as a family friend. And I know that a lot of parents are upset, and again, those contradictory remarks, but I think miracles are happening all over Arlington in this unfortunate setting that we find ourselves in. And just thank you for your comments and reminding us to come together and get through this. So I just wanted to echo that.
Thank you, Ms. Talento.
Thank you, Ms. Talento. Mr. Goldstein.
Yes, thank you. I also want to echo the comments of my colleagues previously, and also Dr. Duran. But particularly, I want to echo his comments that we are all in this together, and that rather than noting divisions, we need to find ways to come together. As one of the speakers said, we're tired of the pandemic, but the pandemic's not tired of us yet. So it's important that we understand that we are two sides of the same coin here. The community and the APS staff, and that together we need to find a way to continue our operation as effectively as possible with the least amount of divisions. I mean, I think the core message you heard from all the speakers is there are no easy answers here. There are no easy answers. We have used them all up. Unfortunately, we don't have easy answers, but pulling together and finding ways that we can do this together, I think, is the necessary thing for us as we move forward. So thank you for the opportunity to make these comments.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. We appreciate you making those comments. And I would like to call on our Vice Chair, Dr. Barbara Cannon, for any comments or questions.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. I don't think I could really add anything different than what was just said. Dr. Duran, thank you for your leadership. I think it's tremendously important, especially to stand up for the staff, no matter how.
Ms. Van Dorn, we've lost your audio. I'm sorry, I do apologize. Dr. Cannon, and we've lost your audio for just a second. Let's see if we can restore that so you can continue. No, not quite yet. 1 second, we are working on it. Really try again, Dr. Cannon.
Okay.
Yes, you are restored.
Was saying, now I'm worried that I'm going to get muted again. I can't really add to what's already been said, but I do want to echo the comments that were already made. Dr. Duran, just want to thank you for your leadership. It is tremendously important to stand up for our staff, especially. We have a community with many different feelings about what is going on. I know that we all in our hearts agree that the enemy is COVID. And again, for community members, please do steer your comments to Dr. Duran and us on the school board. We will respond to your comments, but please let's all continue to be respectful for the staff. And I really appreciate Dr. Duran's statement on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cannon, and I appreciate that. And I just wanted to highlight a few things in the presentation, Dr. Duran. I know we talk a lot about the AVOP. I just want parents who are old school like me to know that that's the paperwork you would fill out in the first day packet way back when. So remember when you came home and your students told you, this is your homework, mom or dad or grandmom or anyone, this is your homework, we need you to fill this out. It is so important that we get that information. We would ask you to please fill out that form so we can continue to have the best communication with you as we are all so separated because of the pandemic. So please, please, please make that your homework if you haven't already done it. I had to remind myself to do the homework myself. So I hope that you will do that homework so that we can have the opportunity to be able to be in the best communication with you as we continue virtually. It's just very important that we have that way to make sure that we can contact you. So I'd ask you to do that. I'd also like to reiterate the importance of the Virginia Preschool Initiative Program that Ms. Talento just spoke about. Our preschool opportunities for our children are so, so, so very important. We talk so much about making sure that we're eliminating opportunity gaps and making sure that our students have opportunities to be able to get early learning, even in the times we're in right now, can really help lessen and perhaps eliminate that opportunity gap. So families who are listening, and I know we have so many families who are working with so many people in our community and supporting people, please, if you have a child and you're interested and you fit that criteria, please let us know, and we will get your child in this high quality program, and we will make sure that we will provide an iPad so that they can participate. Our teachers are ready, willing, and able to help support your children during this time, and we want them to get the extra educational benefit of our Virginia Preschool Initiative. So just want to make sure that I reiterate that. And then lastly, I want to thank Dr. Duran for his comments. And I just want to say how important it is that we have a leader who can recognize when our community is hurting, when we need to try to bring us together. And we've seen this before. We've seen our PTAs come out and work with our families who are in need. We've seen a lot of actions of our community coming together. This virus wants to tear us apart. We know the anxiety and the strain and the stress this is causing on so many of you. We see it every day. Bring us your concerns. We're listening. I want to thank Dr. Duran and the staff for being active listeners, for making themselves available for town halls, for listening and being able to respond with action when they can. And please, please, I know that there's a lot of anxiety out there, but I do know that our teachers are working so hard every day to help our students. If you have concerns, bring them to us. We'll take them. And it's hard. But it's important that we don't turn on each other while the virus is trying to get to us. So with that, I appreciate the comments and thank you, Dr. Duran. And we will move on with the rest of our meeting. We are now at the consent agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
The clerk will call the roll.
All in favor, please say aye. Please say aye. All opposed, say nay. Mr. Goldstein?
Aye.
Dr. Cannon?
Aye.
Ms. Talento?
Aye.
Ms. O'Grady?
Aye.
Ms. Van Dorn?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercado. We do have one monitoring item tonight, the school year 2020-2021 update. Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. And if we could bring up the slideshow, thank you. So tonight I want to present a shorter update, focusing on a few key areas for our upcoming return to school, what we're working on right now. So tonight I want to really focus on the latest health and safety measures, the results of our staff survey process, and an update on the timeline of levels 1 and 2 transition, some information on transportation, and then finally some of our budget projections. And as I stated earlier, I know we're continuing to hear a lot of different opinions and strong feelings. And as we do, we're trying to work and balance where we can to meet the needs of our students and our staff. Right now, we're focusing on how do we begin to think about our students with disabilities and our youngest learners, getting them back to school, in-person support for those families that need that and would like that. You know, a lot of questions have been asked about, and there's been a lot of discussion, and we've talked a lot about different possible ways to think about how do we prioritize and support which students, how do we think about who we should make sure have the opportunity to come in. And so at the end of the day, we are sticking with our state guidelines that we've been receiving from the governor since the return to school plan was put in place, and our state superintendent, where the focus was really on students with disabilities, our youngest learners, and our English learners. So that is what we're going to be looking at and working towards to do when it's safe and operationally possible. So thinking about that, thinking about our health and safety metrics, the slide here is the current health metrics as of the week ending of the 17th. This dashboard was created, as we know, and I've been sharing it a few times, to help clarify some of the health and safety metrics that we're using to help inform decisions when it might be safe to return to school. We update this every Friday on our website. One thing you can see here, if you look at the far left where it says trend analysis, that there are some metrics that are fluctuating more than others, a couple increasing, and one is not applicable yet. And so as we look at that, I want to make sure everyone understands that this dashboard attempts to capture the major takeaways for our status. And there are still many things that we continue to finalize that can't be displayed here, like our contact tracing and our response procedures. But in all of this, as we look at our data, we're working to finalize when we might move forward and having those conversations with public health. So particularly the case incidence rate is really important, and you can see concerning right now where it is, but it's something we have to continue to pay attention to as we think about the health and safety of when we would consider and when we are able to begin to bring back some of those students I talked about, what we're prioritizing, students with disabilities and early learners. This slide projects and shares operational metrics that we have. And as you can see, the majority and a lot of our areas that are on the bottom are in gray with regards to equipment and health measure compliance. We also have some areas that have moved forward a little bit, and you can see those in our cleaning, disinfecting, and some other COVID-19 equipment. So this shows a picture of where we are. But I want to talk a little bit more about staffing. And as we look further at staffing on the upcoming slides, now that our staff have returned their preferences, I want to make a note here of something that I've seen a lot of comments and questions coming in, particularly today, that there's a change in the benchmark for instructional staffing for level 2. Previously it was a target of 35 to 7, and now it's 70. This is because the initial plan, if you recall, at level 2 was focused only on pre-K up to, not all the entire elementary schools. It was just the beginning years. So now that we've incorporated level 2, all pre-K 5 and CTE, and we update that, then we need to update the amount of staff that we would need. But that's for the entire level, and you'll see in a moment for level 2 that we're phasing in elements of level 2. And so this percentage obviously will fluctuate depending on the actual number of students that have requested in-person learning. So to be very clear, we will not need to meet this metric in order to begin the phasing in of level 2 students for in-person learning, because we're taking that leveled approach. So in other words, we don't need all the 70 since we're only beginning to look at pre-K, K, and then eventually move itself up. We will dive a little deeper in that into the coming slides that I have for you, but I wanted to make sure that the understanding here is that these are averages based upon the preference survey responses across all of our scales of instruction and support employees. And one other thing to note on this slide is that about employee exclusion, that metric, this particular one is only able to be updated on Fridays after we get all of our internal processes to get that information. So this number here is the same as last week's dashboard, and that might see a change when we update it tomorrow if it's included then. Some of the key takeaways you can see here is the region has seen an increase in case incidence rate. We saw that on our dashboard, that we as a division continue to receive increased custodial supplies and COVID-19 equipment. So that is improving, but there is the global supply chain that's straining our ability to get to where we need to be 100% with many of those things. And the employee exclusion continues to fluctuate. And that's because we know that we're monitoring that and it's fluctuating, and we'll talk more about that later in terms of that as we look at staff survey results. There was mentioned some of the people who called in, there has been updated guidance on close contact. The CDC has updated their guidance to include that someone who was in 6 feet of an infected person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period, starting from 2 days before the illness onset, or for asymptomatic patients 2 days prior to the test specimen collected. And so as we think about that, so individual exposures added together over a 24-hour period, so example, 3 5-minute exposures for a total of 15 minutes. And data is very limited, making it difficult to precisely define what that close contact would be. However, 15 cumulative minutes of exposure at a distance of 6 feet or less is what we will use as an operational definition for when we would do contact investigation. And so I'll make sure to refresh our general response to COVID-19 positive case when we returned in-person instruction on the next slide, and that has our updated guidance that you can see here. And as I shared at our last monitoring report, if there is a confirmed COVID case in a classroom, in order to address the educational impacts of the classroom and also to reduce any potential transmission, the entire classroom would transition. And this is all a lot of questions we've been receiving from parents and staff about how would we respond if that occurs. And that's obviously in collaboration and direct guidance with our public health department. A lot of questions and wonderings about the results of our surveys that we've put out. And so tonight I only have the information to present to our staff surveys because with what happened this week with regards to the outage, our family results were not able to be completed because the day of the network outage was the day we were going to be asking families to complete. So we needed to extend that, and that is open until tomorrow. But in terms of the results from our staff surveys that we've seen, we had level 1 survey for our family staff members who are supporting students in that area, and then we had all staff from October 5th through the 16th. That was extended for a few days as well. We are now analyzing the results so that we can see where we are with operational metrics for returning to levels 1 and 2. The survey helped include a lot of information regarding the process and options for staff. And as part of the survey, employees who met or who believe they meet high-risk criteria for COVID-19 modifications, they had the information of the forms that would be needed so that they can work with HR for any specific accommodations that might be needed by them. So here you see the summary of all of our staff survey results. We had 4,291 employees, or 63%, complete the survey. T-scale, which is our teachers, had a much higher response, 88.6 of them, and our A-scale, our assistants, 85.9% responded. 39% of our T-scale or teachers indicated a preference for in-person. And this week we're focused on those in that group who would return in level 1 to see where we have preferences and how we can work with staff to make sure that we meet the needs of the families. And we have 500 students that were identified for level 1 as a possibility, and 225 of those families have indicated a desire to return. A-scale preferences were provided to principals and the DTL, and we had, like I said a minute ago, an excellent response rate with the number of assistants responding. Based on our need for assistance as we transition and prepare for levels 1 and 2, we are going to be contacting those additional percent who did not respond for an assignment that wherever they are needed, based on the fact that there was not a response, then they will be contacted by their principal or supervisor to where they would be needed to help support what we see from our students and our families. And so there you can see some information overall, and I wanted to make sure everyone had this update. We've been asked this many times from many different folks, so I wanted to give that update here. As indicated already, the family surveys has been extended for level 2, but our level 1, they've all been reached out to, and we do have those 225 families that we are working with to bring back for level 1. All of our pre-K 5th through 5th grade families and our CTE students, again, have until tomorrow. They can change their selection. They can leave it as it is. If they don't put anything, it will be defaulted as we've indicated before. But one thing that's important is that the information about transportation in that survey is so critical because our bus routing is very complex and we need to have the accurate data to know who truly needs the bus service. And we're going to be using this information from the parent view to really help us with that. Unlike in the past where it was just anyone who might need it, we really need to know because the limited space we have on buses and the tight planning that has to occur. Normally our transportation department has over the summer to do a lot of this planning, and they're now having to do what they do over quite a bit of time into a very, very short time. So that information will be very critical. As we shared in the last meeting, our revised plan for phasing students back to school is based on how to best serve all of the students and also make sure that we are considering our staff and their preferences and how do we find the best way to make both work. But our student need is driving this, and we're driving this through our priorities. As I indicated, students with disabilities in level 1, and then level 2 are early learners, which includes also students with disabilities at that grade level and English learners at that level. And as we shifted and revised our plan to make sure that regardless of which model, that there would be 4 days of teacher-supported direct instruction. And we will and are maintaining and continuing and growing and strengthening the virtual model, as well as thinking about how we might have an in-person model for those families and students who may need that additional support, particularly, again, I'm going to say it again, for our early learners and our students with disabilities in level 1, and our CTE students. So tonight I just want to focus specifically though on level 1 and 2. Based on the staffing preferences and our operational data and others, we have adjusted our student grouping to make sure that we do it based on a safe and an operational way to make sure that all of the students who can gradually be transitioned in by grade level. So a couple of updates here. For our level 1 students with disabilities, November 4th is when we would be beginning with that group. We're working with that. As noted in our dashboard, we anticipate, a variety of health measures that need to be in place, and we'll continue to look at that. But right now, level 1 for November 4th. And so based on the need for more time to assign and prepare assistants and teachers for this, we moved the start date just slightly. It was initially October 29th to November 4th, so not quite a week. So that way we could make sure that we had preparations in place and all the busing and everything else that might need to be. Level 2, we are again considering level 2 still as pre-K to 5th grade and our CTE students. But as I said a minute ago, based on our operational metrics and where we are in terms of being able to plan for transportation and our staffing, we are going to be phasing in level 2 by starting with our earliest learners, November 12th, pre-K, kindergarten, plus our CTE high school students, and then moving to the next 2 phases as we see with the metrics and the time and the health metrics and the operational ability for 1st and 2nd grade, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and you can see those that leveling there, hopefully in December, 1st and 2nd, and then early January, 3rd and 4th and 5th. And I've said before, and people have asked, well, why do you keep changing the dates? You've said one date. I have said from the very beginning that all these are projected dates that we have to look at our health and safety and operational metrics, because we're not going to just move forward on a date because we gave a date. We need to move forward on the date when we know we have the operational ability to do what we need to do and the health and safety metrics that tell us that we can. And as indicated, I'm not going to go into tonight, but level 3 is for our secondary students. So I want to spend the next few slides painting a picture of what the day will be like for our level 1 and level 2 students. For students with disabilities in level 1, instruction will be provided both virtually and in person, depending upon the eligibility of level 1 teachers to teach in person or via distance learning. And students will participate 4 days a week with a combination of assistance in person from teachers and from assistants. And they will be with them for 4 days a week. As I presented in October 8th, our last board meeting, the revised hybrid model, we will be keeping the entire grade levels together versus splitting them by last name. And the same teacher will be with them in the hybrid class in person and then also virtually. And as we start with phase 1, you'll see we're just starting with pre-K and K. So for level 2, phase 1, pre-K would be Tuesday, Wednesday only, and then kindergarten Thursday, Friday. And as we move to the next phase, it would be adding grade 1 and 2, so you'd add another grade for each of those days, and then eventually the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I've continued to receive a lot of questions regarding start and end times in the hybrid and distance learning, and we are going to align the schedule so they're the same for each model. This is important to allow staff, whether you're in virtual or hybrid model, to have that common planning time with your colleagues at the same grade and ensure consistency and instruction between both models, because we want to keep a solid virtual model and we want to have a solid hybrid model. So having that consistency is very important. The start times will be the regular start time for each school, and the end time will be adjusted for in-person learning to align with the distance learning schedule. And all these, any changes that might happen for each school will be posted online and communicated well in advance. And there may be some adjustments needed as we phase in more students, really around how we can transport students. It impacts some of that opportunity for change. We've also received many questions from staff and students and families about the ability to stay together with their current classes, and we know that that is a major issue and concern, and so we're going to work as best we can to maintain that consistency. However, some assignments may change based on the results of family and staff choices, but we're going to work through and see how we might communicate on supporting that opportunity for families. We've also created a graphic that I hope that you have not seen, that you'll see it now and know that it's available, about the day in the life of a hybrid student at the elementary level. A lot of highlights here and questions about what will happen in that day, about bus riding, about when you arrive, what happens with if there's an incident of COVID or a suspicion, what happens for meals, specials. So I won't read all the slide to you, but I do want you to know that it is available and it's downloadable on our website. So I encourage you to look at that and to ask any questions you might have as you look through that and see. For our CTE students, those that are in the high school at the Career Center, students will be following safety protocols when they arrive and come into the CTE labs, as you can see on the slide. And once in the labs, they'll be working on various competencies tied to curriculum. And this is important for our CTE students to have that hands-on engagement for their industry certification or the licensure that they're working towards. So if they're a student who's learning about automotives and that type of thing, how do they determine brakes if they're in safety tolerances, or how do they replace the brakes on a car? That's very hands-on type of activity that they're able to do now by coming in 2 days a week. If they're an EMT student, learning how to assess the patient's breathing and provide more depth and rate and quality. Electricity students, wiring residential and commercial circuits and testing them, making sure they're able to pass local codes. These are all experiences that are invaluable as we're helping these students get prepared for a future career or educational opportunity and being able to, again, get that licensure and certification that they need. So the students in this that are coming in as a part of this phase and this level will be staying at the Career Center until lunch or for the full afternoon session to allow for transportation home without missing their other instructional time. So really, when we think about our ability to go forward in each level, it's really dependent on the ability to meet some of these key metrics here that you see on this slide, and really operational concerns. And I presented all these at the last meeting, but won't go into them again. But our buses, our equipment, our health measure, our employee availability, and our cleaning and disinfecting is so important, and that's driving what we can and do, and it does impact the date sometime, because we have to have all these things in place. If we're going to do something, we have to do it well and safely. As a reminder, these 4 things are part of our primary essential expectations regarding health and safety: face covering, health screening of all employees and students, having that 6-foot distancing, and the enhanced cleaning and disinfecting. This will be a part of what we expect in every building. We're preparing safety videos, signage, etc. But these are key elements that I keep repeating so that we're clear on what is expected. Quickly want to review a little bit on transportation and the routing of students. The bus routing has been very challenging, as I said earlier, because this takes a different approach when we're thinking about the reduced number of students that can be on a bus and the short time that's taken to really try and route students when normally we would have quite more time to do that. And I just want to again thank the county staff, the collaboration on the walk and bike work group that's been working on how do we help think about walk zones that will help students and families that may not need the bus, but a different way to get there. And so there's a variety of things that have been happening for quite some time, and this group has been working since July, meeting regularly on how to figure out transportation for our students. And our principals or their designees are joining work groups to help provide input on typical school arrival and dismissal operations, and doors to be used for screening and entry. So all these things are going on to make sure we have in place, and that's a key element of our operation. School area maintenance of traffic plans, etc. So I want to thank our operations team who are working on this last final piece that is so critical and important. A last part of my monitoring report is just to provide an update on the financial projections. We did have the opportunity to meet with the county in our joint session yesterday and provide much of this information, so I'll quickly review some of that. When we think about our revenue projections, I won't go through all of this, but you can see that there are some changes that we've had since the last time. The county revenue decrease has not changed, but what we can see here is we do have, in addition, the county has agreed, on top of the $7 million, which I've been reporting on, has agreed to provide the schools with funds remaining from the $500,000 for Internet Essentials for students. So there's some remaining funds that they had set aside that we did not use, so that they are now providing to us. The county manager is also recommending that our general operating reserve decrease to reflect the current budget levels for the county, and that will result in refunding $280,000 to us for their share of that fund. The sales tax estimates previously indicated a loss of 3.6. Well, the General Assembly has adopted a hold harmless provision for state sales tax, which means we won't lose those funds, so that's been put to zero. And the state will be providing additional CARES Act funding, $4.73 million, and we did share that earlier, but these funds are intended, for things that need to be taking place between now and December 30th. In terms of local revenue, losses from extended day that we shared previously, but we also want to share that there has been some changes there that you can see about building use and cameras, and that's a lot 0.06. We also have some additional loss may be occurred through the end of the year with regards to aquatics and summer school, Montessori tuition and other fees, and so there's some change that may happen there. And so I want to emphasize, though, that all these changes that you can see in the expected revenue losses, very significant, as you can see at the bottom, 15.8 to 22.9, will continue to evolve, and we will keep you informed about any changes to that. But right now, we see a 15.8 to 22.9 decrease in revenue. On our cost projections, we can see the total expenditures at this time is $12.5 million. And we continue to gather more information on what costs might be. The only real change on this slide from previously is the increase from 6.53 to 7.1 million for health and safety needs as a result of finding a funding formula error in our spreadsheet. But the rest of the costs are pretty much the same. But as we move forward with any changes to our return to learn, any additional increase in our virtual support, the costs may go up as we move throughout the year, but this is where we are right now. Savings, we're continuing to look at savings, but the main change here that you will see is projected savings in debt service as a result of bond refunding in the fall 2020 bond sale. And this information was just provided to us by the county this week. So that has been the only change here. So right now we do have projected savings of $8.97 million. Certainly, as we go through the year, we're going to continue to look for more savings within our budget. And this, of course, will again depend on our return to school plan. And when we return, and if we need some more support for in virtual or vice versa, there may be changes that we see there. So in summary, all of these revenue costs and savings projections, this slide shows the total shortfall based on the current info that we do have. And that's 19.3 to 26.4. That's what we have at this time, and we'll continue to update any other changes that we see. All projections, except the extended day revenue losses noted, assume virtual instruction through the first quarter only, and so as we move on to other changes, that might change our projections. So a lot of information, not as much as I normally provide, because this is only 26 slides instead of the normal 40 or 50. But some very important updates for us is where we are. So thank you for the opportunity again to share this with you, Madam Chair, and school board colleagues, and also to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Duran, for sharing the information as you're receiving it. We do appreciate it. And I want to turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions or comments regarding the presentation. I'll start with Ms. Talento. Ms. Talento.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. I just want to start off with one comment, two questions, or what? I have two things. Sorry. Dr. Duran, on slide 15, I just want to highlight something because this came up in one of the town halls on Friday, the second one that was in Spanish. And thank you again for making yourself available to the community on Friday. I know that there were a lot of questions, but someone had asked about the satellite primary Montessori classes. And those are primary Montessori classes that are not at the Montessori Public School for Arlington, and how they would be scheduled, because they actually serve 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, so kindergarten as well in that primary model. And I noted here that they are being served with the pre-K attendance in the hybrid model. So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you for answering that on your report out I know you didn't mention it, but it's there that says, next to pre-K, there's an asterisk, and it says include satellite primary Montessori classes. So sometimes we don't notice the information, but thank you. It's in there now, and I appreciate you getting the community that answer. I thought it was a good question, and we didn't know how to answer it at the time, so thank you for that. Okay, and then the one thing I did have, I don't know if you have mentioned this in other presentations. I'm worried that you may have, and I just didn't process it, but I don't, can you explain a little bit what employee exclusion for FFCRA is? Maybe it's something you've done in every presentation, but with all the information, but today is the first time I noticed it, and I don't know what we're referring to on that. It's slide 5. Is it on 4.2? Oh, okay. Oh, is that's, okay, I've never seen it. So that's the second to last. What is FFCRA? Is that the family, I'm just trying to understand, is that like the Leave Act? I'm confused a little bit about that. Like I said, I'm sure it's something you've had every time, but I just today.
We have had this data point on there every time, but Mr. Pope, if you can explain in detail more what that data point comes from. We have provided previously some updates, but to help better clarify FFCRA, Mr. Pope, if you can provide clarification, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. And good evening, Ms. Talento. I'll have Mr. Redding jump in and correct anything that I may say because his department also helps. The FFCRA is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which does provide several conditions in which an employee can be out. So when we look at how we calculate this particular metric, we look at the employees who are required to report, those employees who fall into an FFCRA category excluding childcare, which is one of the categories for being excluded from work, or any of the Department of Labor and Industry's emergency temporary standards exclusion criteria. If an employee meets one of those criteria, we basically take the percentage, or excuse me, the total number of employees that are excluded, divide that by the total number of employees who are currently required to report to work.
Okay, that's really helpful. So then in slide 5, when we say that the reasons are continuing to fluctuate, it means that the actual act is adding or taking away reasons that are then having an impact on what our employees qualify for. Is that correct?
In partial. So the reason it continues to fluctuate is because employees who are excluded come off and on based on algorithms, based on their qualifying reason for being excluded. So a potential employee could be on there for 14 days, which would be included in that percentage. And then on the 14th day would roll off, which is why it would be fluctuating and not stable.
I understand. Thank you. I just wanted to have better clarity around understanding that data point. And finally, just on this, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Duran, for the clarification that it's an average of all of our data points that will determine how we move forward. Yes. I appreciated that. I think a lot of parents had questions about that. And so understanding what our data points mean and then knowing that it's a holistic picture versus each level picture, I really appreciated that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady.
Thank you very much, Ms. Talento. I'd like to move to Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein, questions or comments?
No, thank you. I was going to ask about that acronym that I didn't understand either, but Tanya did that, so I appreciate that. So now, in the interest of time, I've got a couple of little, detail questions, but I can ask those offline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Van Doorn.
I have no questions. Thank you very much for the great update, Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Dr.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Cannonen?
Yes, thank you, Ms. O'Grady, and thank you, Dr. Duran, for the presentation, and as always, for your responsiveness to what you've been hearing from the community, et cetera. I have a couple of questions. So first, I do want to just double down on what you said about the dashboard and make sure that we all understand where you're headed with this. So you did say that while you have dates on it, you're looking at the metrics to make the decision. So the first date, though, that you have for level 1 is November 4th, what you have listed on the PowerPoint. And that, by the way, is happening before our next school board meeting. So that is, you know, a little more imminent than it was, you know, when we started the year. And so I'm wondering, when are you going to make the call? And I see that what's the criterion that we're not passing at the moment is that virus rate, and that's so important. It's at 9.4. You want it to be less than 9. So it's close, but you're only going to do if it's 8.99 or lower? And when are you going to make that decision?
Right now, based on what we have, and that was the one time we see on the metrics, so right now we are proceeding with that level 1 occurring on November 4th. And so if we see any drastic change in that as before then, in terms of that metric, we would then pause. But right now we are moving forward with level 1. It's level 2 is the one that we need to pay close attention to. Level 1 is 225 students. Level 2 is much more, phase 1 is much more expansive with all pre-K and K and CTE. So that's the one that we're paying close attention to. But right now we are moving forward with level 1. And so really it's about the rolling average and the change rate. Mr. Pope, if you'd like to add more information, that'd be helpful. But to answer your main question, Dr. Cannon, right now we are moving forward with level 1 based on what's there. And Mr. Pope, would you like to add any more additional clarification on that data point and what we're looking at and why we're looking at it in that way? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So one of the things that we directly link to in that particular metric is looking at the VDH's website, and they have both the daily regional metrics, which you see that we publish, and then they dive deep into that using the CDC's primary and secondary indicators. What Dr. Duran is mentioning is we look at that rolling average, which you see what we publish, and then we look at the change rate. The change rate really determines and tells us how drastic that is moving from that rolling average, and that will really kind of help us tell how stable community transmission may be or how volatile it may be moving forward.
Okay, this is interesting, a little bit different than what I thought, and I think that's fine, but you know, and I assume, and again, this is a small group of students, you're communicating with the families, they're going to know November 4th, but I thought we really wanted that solid bar of, what were those yellow colors for level 1. The virus rate is not quite there. It is close. And I understand exactly what you're saying, Mr. Pope. You're looking at those dynamics and fluctuations underneath, and it's close and you feel fine about it. But it's just a little different, I think, than the way we've described it, where to me it feels like if we're not all at least at level 1, we're not going to level 1. But you're saying, based on everything you're looking at, you do feel like November 4th is going to happen unless those underlying metrics start doing something different. So you're feeling good about November 4th.
Correct. We'll be keeping watching this throughout every level, like we've talked about, and kind of pausing or reverting based on that underlying current of the change rate of those particular metrics. This just happens to be the one that gets reported out in the news more frequently, which is why it's shown in the dashboard this way.
Okay. And then, Ms. O'Grady, if you don't mind me just pursuing this a little bit more, and then I'll turn it over. To get to level 2, and I know a lot of people tuning in are interested in these next levels, that virus rate it's really asking us to have a much lower virus rate, and that seems like that's a big leap to expect to happen, leap downward, to really happen by, what did you have, mid-November for
November
hoping
12th.
you can start? So sort of same question, are you know, is that the criterion you have on that dashboard maybe not the whole story? In other words, are you feeling, I know that's where we're not certain about the date, but you're feeling like things are headed today. It looks like things are headed in a direction where we can be looking at those dates that you've shared?
Correct. We're still watching that very closely. So if you look at our level 2 metrics here that's on the screen right now, what is unaware and unable to kind of be displayed without continuing to build this slide out further and further and making the font smaller is that level 2 and being in those phases and those smaller groups. When we display it on the dashboard, we're talking about the total encompassing of level 2. And so as we look at, we'll call it wave 1, in that it's still a small group of students. So we're going to monitor what that looks like and coming up in that projected date. And as we see that, we may need to make adjustments as we see those undercurrent changes in these rates moving forward.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's very helpful. That's very helpful. And I think for those who are looking, who are asking for kids to start going back, that this is looking pretty optimistic to me about being able to do that. So thank you. Ms. O'Grady, I do have more questions, so I assume that you'll come back around.
I will come back around, Dr. Cannon, and however, I do think you may be the only person with additional questions at this time. If that is not the case, then please indicate that to me, colleagues. I'll recognize myself then at this point in time. And I just want to mention to the community that yesterday the school board had a joint work session with the county board where we discussed our budget. We shared with our colleagues in the county the budget information that Dr. Duran presented. We thank them for their more than $10 million of support to help keep us going at a time when we needed financial support to continue our virtual education. And we hope to continue that collaboration and communication that we've been doing over the last several months so that we can make sure as we're moving forward we understand what our budget challenges are. They shared with us that they have many budget challenges, and we do as well. So with some of the current support, we've had a little bit of ability to be able to address some of our needs, though my colleagues did share that there were concerns about how we're going to continue to look to the future under some continuing and potentially expanding budget pressures. In addition to that, I had a question, Dr. Duran, regarding your presentation. I did note that we're moving back some dates, as you very eloquently explained some of the challenges that we're facing. We are hearing from some families that, and not all families, we even heard from some students today that virtual instruction is working for them, but for some families, their students are having some trouble with the change to virtual instruction. And so I didn't know whether or not there might be some a reminder of supports or help that families can turn to help support their students if they're struggling with the virtual instruction.
Yes, thank you for that question, Cheryl Grady, and I would love for Assistant Superintendent Ms. Loft to provide a reminder of some of the things that are in place for supporting students who may be struggling, and there are some, and some supports that could be put in place. So Ms. Loft, if you can remind us and our community about what some of those things might be. Thank you.
Sure. So at the elementary level, our teachers are engaging now in daily reading, math, and social emotional learning interventions. The collaborative learning teams that are formed at each grade level and by content are tracking student engagement and then using that data to help sort of determine individual interventions that are necessary. And they've added additional office hours to meet additional students' needs. At our middle and high school levels, they are using the interim progress report information about students who have earned D's and E's thus far to tailor those interventions as necessary. They're using at the middle school, they're using screener data to determine where students are falling behind in math and reading, and they're creating targeted plans to address those gaps. And as I said, at high school, they are using the interim progress report grades to tailor those interventions. They also are relying a great deal on office hours. And I should say also our office hours are available at middle school as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Loft. So if a parent has a concern, and what should they do?
Sure. So they should start first by talking with their child to get an understanding of where the child is experiencing problems and challenges, and then certainly reach out to the teacher that really forms that triad of success of our teachers, our students, and our parents. If they're having difficulty reaching a teacher or have further questions, certainly at the secondary level, I'd suggest that they reach out to the counselor. And then, as always, our school principals are in place and in contact with staff and really have a pulse of their students' performance so they can be a real resource as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate you answering my questions. With that, I'm just going to go around one more time to make sure that everyone has their questions answered. Ms. Talento?
I don't have any additional questions. Thank you, Mr. Grady.
Thank you. Mr. Goldstein?
No more additional questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Dorn.
No questions. Thank you very much for the update.
Absolutely. And Dr. Cannon, and as I thought, we're back to you.
Okay. Well, I have 3 questions, but I think that maybe we can keep them brief. Some of these are a little bit repetitive of previous conversations. So, Dr. Duran, I've asked you a version of this question, I think, at several of our recent school board meetings, but you presented the information about teacher preferences, and continues to be that teacher preferences aren't a match with family preferences, and what's really going to happen to those the families who, there are more families that want to be returning to hybrid in person than teachers. So what really happens with that mismatch? And I just want to confirm with you, I think in the past you have talked about teachers are expressing their preference, but there will be conversations. Could you just explain a little bit about what happens next? Who is working with the teachers? Is it central office? Is it principals? Does the survey stand as is? What's really next in terms of determining how we're going to provide hybrid instruction to those families who do want hybrid instruction?
Sure. There's a combination of conversations that would be happening, and Mr. Redding can add some more information on that. But for some of our employees who have indicated on the survey that they are not able to return, then there would be conversations that will be occurring with them in human resources staff to make sure that we're supporting the appropriate accommodations that those employees need. There also would be conversations with their school principals or their supervisors if they're not a teacher, maybe another staff member that is needed in transportation or food service, etc. So their supervisor would then be having conversations with some who have put a preference to not return, but are not under one of the areas where they would qualify needing those additional documents, to really try and understand what is the concern and how do we work to modify or put some supports in place for them to support them coming back safely. So it would be a combination of those two. And Mr. Redding, I don't know if you'd like to add anything else to that.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. Yes, I think you described pretty well the process we're using as we go forward. As principals need to meet the needs of the students who are reporting in person, then they'll be assigning staff who don't necessarily qualify for a designation to telework for the full until December 31st. And we'll be working with those staff around what are their needs to ensure that they feel safe as they're returning to school. So we'll be working closely with principals to flesh that out as we move forward.
And then the only other part I would reiterate what I indicated in my presentation was there were several staff members who did not give a preference. And so those individuals would be contacted by their principal or supervisor to be assigned based on where the need is.
Excellent. Thank you. So the bottom line, and every time you put a PowerPoint together with information, there will be people that will be concerned about what's being shared. So the bottom line is the data and results from the staff survey are not the final numbers for how many folks we're going to have in our buildings when all is said and done.
That is correct. The data is what we're using to try and make the match and support our staff's preferences and also their concerns, but may not be the exact match because, again, there are some preferences missing, and then there are some staff who working with them to provide modifications, accommodations beyond their preference would then potentially look different than the number you see here.
Great, thank you. My next question is about those who want to stay in virtual. And I've heard from a number of parents who are concerned as we're digging in and developing our plans for hybrid. There's a concern that for those who think virtual is going well, they want to stick with it, but they also don't want to lose the good virtual learning that they're getting. So I think there have been some a sense that perhaps class sizes in virtual might go up. There might be mixed grades in virtual classrooms. Could I just ask if any of those are part of the planning for those who stay in all virtual?
Yeah, those have not been part of the planning process. I'll defer to Ms. Loft if she'd like to add some more. I know that in the town hall, Ms. Loft said that was clearly stated that was not our priority. That's not what we're planning towards. And so we are maintaining virtual as the model. We are continuing to provide teacher support on the 27th, 28th so that they can have more professional learning on that. And so, Ms. Loft, if you'd like to add anything more to that, but to answer your question, that is not our plan and that's not where we're working towards.
That's probably the answer. Do you have a brief additional response, Ms. Loft? I think I just wanted to know if that was true or not.
No, Dr. Duran answered it aptly.
All right, excellent. Ms. O'Grady, can I ask one more question?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So this one is about actually the return to school slide in elementary. Another one where I think some parents were concerned. It's about the parent drop-off piece, and what's written on that information is that parents are going to stay with their child through them getting tested. So if you're taking your child to school, you're there with them, until they're tested, and then also at the bus stop. Parents of those sort of older elementary age kids who, those kids are generally at some point ready to walk or bike to school on their own without their parents. I know we're phasing this in, we're doing pre-K, but is that definite, or are you hearing from the community and open to maybe thinking about whether there's some older elementary kids who, have traditionally would be planning to go to school independently without their parents?
Well, as we think about older students that are more perhaps developmentally appropriate to say that they could return home on their own, I mean, the challenge here is why we need parents or a guardian or someone to remain is if a child goes through the screening and is identified as not being able to enter the building, then they're going to need to go home and they won't be able to stay. And so if they are an older child and maybe a high school student, someone like that potentially can on their own return back, then we can consider that. But in terms of our younger age students, we definitely don't want that to happen. The other concern we have even then is if they're an older child, they're middle school, high school, and they're really sick. We wouldn't want to send them home alone if they're sick. We would want to make sure they have an adult taking care of them. So it is going to be very important, in our opinion, that we have, in our expectations, that there is an adult or someone there that's available to make sure that if they do go through our screening and are identified as needing assistance and care, that they get that care, and we wouldn't want to send them alone by themselves.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. That's something that parents have been concerned about. I think maybe we'll want to get a little more feedback on that and continue talking about it, I hope.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cannon, and we appreciate your comments. And thank you, Dr. Duran, for your update, and thanks to the staff for their ongoing efforts to support learning this school year. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
There are 2 action items on our agenda tonight. First, we will adopt the internal audit plan for the 2020-21 school year. Dr. Cannon is the chair of the audit committee, so I'll ask her to introduce this item.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have Mr. Mickevice here, and we did see this item for information at our previous school board meeting, and I believe, Mr. Mickevice, that there are no new updates on this item.
That is correct.
Great. So, Ms. O'Grady, I think maybe if there are any clarifying questions, otherwise I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cannon, and let me find out if there are any clarifying questions or comments. And this time I'll start with Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein?
No, ma'am. No questions from here.
Thank you. Then Ms. Van Dorn.
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Talento?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
And I also do not have any questions. So Dr. Cannon, we welcome your motion.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I move that the board adopt the internal audit plan for the 2020-2021 school year.
Is there a second?
Second?
Then I believe that we are ready for, I think we're ready for the clerk to call for a vote.
All those in favor of the motion say yes. Those opposed say no. Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Dr. Cannon?
Yes.
Ms. O'Grady?
Yes.
Ms. Talento?
Yes.
Ms. Van Dorn?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercado. I appreciate it. Our next action item is the Education Center Reuse Final Design and Construction Contract Award. Dr. Duran.
Yes, this action item, the Education Center Reuse Final Design and Construction Contract Award, was presented at the October 8th school board meeting by Jeff Chambers, Director of Design and Construction, and he is available if there are any questions, but there are no new information and no new updates, so we'll turn it back to you in case there are questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duran. I will then ask to see if there are any questions or clarifying comments. We'll start with Ms. Van Dorn.
I don't have any questions, but I do have a motion when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Dorn. Ms. Talento?
No, thank you. I don't have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldstein.
Yeah, I do have a question. So please remind me if there is a possibility of additional modification to this design as we go through the schematic and the final and the county's use permit process. I mean, is there a possibility that what we're seeing here is going to change?
I think that we've been through all of those processes. This is the final design. This is actually the bid from the contractor.
Okay, and so we're settled with the county. The county's
That is correct.
Use permit, so we're not expecting any changes with any of those hurdles.
No, we've actually received all of the building permits as well.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, Mr. Goldstein. Dr. Cannon?
No questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cannon. Then I believe that we are ready to vote on this item. May I have
I'd like to make a motion, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Dorn.
Okay, thank you very much. Having carefully reviewed the extensive input from the BLPC, PFRC, Civic Association leaders, and other stakeholders, and the superintendent's recommendation, I move that the school board approve the final design as generally described in Exhibits A through D in the materials from the October 22nd, 2020 school board meeting. By approving Exhibits A through D, the school board approves the following aspects of the project. Reaffirm basic project criteria to create 500 to 600 new high school seats to be completed in time for the start of the school year 2022. Site plan and development. You're asking, oh, okay. Site plan and development conditions of the approved use permit. This, I'm sorry, folks, I'm not good at looking at the chat at the same time that I'm reading. The school board authorizes the chair to sign related legal instruments, such as easements, vacations, and dedications, as may be required to comply with conditions of the use permit, provided such instruments are first reviewed and approved as to form by APS legal counsel and are shown in the final design. Final design for the project is generally described in Exhibits A and B. Revisions to the education specifications as generally described in Exhibit C. Total project budget and funding available as described in Exhibit D. Construction contract award to MCN Build and in the amount of $27,886,537 by increasing the existing purchase order to include the added contract value, and transfer of $500,000 from the capital reserve to the project funding.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Dorn, and I do apologize for, I was just trying to see if we had a screen that we could put up so that people could see what you were saying as you were reading it. So with that, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The clerk will call the roll. Thank you. The clerk will call the roll.
All those in favor of the motion say yes. Those opposed say no. Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Dr. Cannonen?
Yes.
Ms. O'Grady?
Yes.
Ms. Talento?
Yes.
Ms. Van Doren?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercado. Tonight, we're now going to move on to the information items, and we have 5 of them. First is the school board's 2020 budget direction. And the budget direction is a very important piece of our work here at APS. This is where the school board members work together to try to set a framework to share with the superintendent and his staff some of the important things that we would like to see as he works to develop the budget coming up. And this will be Dr. Duran's first APS budget. And so we'd like to share with you where we are in that. Next slide, please. So after several weeks of work amongst the school board members, we have discussed many elements for moving forward with a budget direction. Of course, as you all know, we are currently in a budget situation where we are in a deficit mode in our current budget, and we are anticipating similar challenges with the upcoming budget. And I believe that this proposed budget direction reflects many of those things, and we're bringing it forward for our for further discussion tonight. I'd like to read the current draft proposed budget direction. The mission of the Arlington Public Schools is to ensure all students learn and thrive in safe, healthy, and supportive learning environments. The school board is committed to providing a high-quality education for our students, and our aim with this budget direction is to ensure APS financially supports its mission in the FY 2022 budget. Arlington County consistently provides strong financial support to APS, demonstrating our community's commitment to public education. APS and Arlington County will work together to continue this strong, focused support despite the severe economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The economic downturn caused by the pandemic has resulted in significantly decreased revenues for APS, while at the same time the school system is experiencing additional costs due to the pandemic, as well as the continuing cost pressures due to projected ongoing student enrollment growth, increasing debt service, and staff compensation requirements. In the spring, because of the pandemic, the school board needed to make deep cuts in the FY 2021 budget, eliminating staff compensation increases, significantly reducing minor construction, major maintenance funding, and increasing class size by 1 at grades K-12, among others, and needed to use $17 million in reserve funds to balance the budget. These actions put APS at a significant disadvantage for the FY 2022 budget. To fulfill our mission and goals, the school board directs the superintendent to prepare an FY 2022 budget that maintains our large and diverse school system, focuses on supporting our staff, and emphasizes the school board's 3 overarching goals: focus on an excellent education regardless of the delivery model, support staff to be innovative and deliver high-quality virtual and in-person instruction, continue to focus on equity. The school board is also focused on the need to ensure long-term efficiency and sustainability. The school board therefore also directs the superintendent to present a budget that is consistent with APS's mission, vision, core values, and strategic plan. Include funding to support the growth of our large and diverse system that is allocated to deliberately ensure targeted and differentiated investment in teaching and learning experiences for the varied and unique needs of each student, while maintaining a strong instructional program for all students and maximizing student achievement and well-being. Continue to implement requirements in the English Learners DOJ settlement agreement to meet deadlines. The school board waives salary policy G3.2.1 for 1 year to provide maximum flexibility to the superintendent and his staff as they work to balance the 2022 budget. Understanding that employees are APS's most valuable assets and did not receive a salary increase in FY 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its financial fallout, the school board requests that the superintendent work to find some sort of compensation increase for employees in FY 2022, if at all possible. Further, we request that the superintendent work with the school board and employee groups to prioritize employee compensation as revenues return and proceed with the compensation study with the goal of having recommendations to inform future compensation increases. If possible, Continue the implementation of the initiative to provide additional technical support center technicians to meet the standards of quality begun in the FY 2020 budget. And consider steps to continue to implement recommendations from the evaluations of services for students with special needs and English learners, including but not limited to phasing in over 3 to 5 years those recommendations with budget implications. Present a needs-based budget with options for reductions and repurposing of funds as needed that are focused on equitable strategic changes and service delivery across the school division. The superintendent is further directed to review all budget categories to identify potential efficiencies and cost savings, explore longer-term strategies for efficiencies, such as collaboration with the county on services and service fees, present a transparent budget that provides details for significant changes in a major expenditure category, such as salaries, benefits, purchases, services, etc. Consider recommendations from the 2019-20 Citizen Advisory Council reports and advice provided during this budget development process, program evaluations, internal audits, and other relevant reports. Explore increases in revenue, including review of all APS fees, including a cost-benefit analysis. Consider reserve funds as needed in FY 22 in accordance with school board practice. Provide 3-year forecast of revenues and expenditures to gauge long-term financial sustainability and ensure that APS complies with all federal, state, and local laws. With that, I'd like to turn to my colleagues to see if there are any comments or questions regarding the proposed budget direction. I'd like to start with Ms. Van Dorn. Ms. Van Dorn.
Thank you, and I want to thank Leslie Peterson and Dr. Duran for taking all of our comments to come together with this initial draft, and your coordination on this, Ms. O'Grady, and everybody's input. None of us like the situation we're in. I think this is a good, solid guidance with a lot of detail. I will say, and Mr. Goldstein spoke eloquently to this last night in our joint meeting with the county board, we really should be giving our staff an increase. And they are working so hard, and we are not staying on par with other school districts. And we need to do something about that. So I do hope that we're able to do that, and I do hope that the superintendent finds a way to provide an increase for our staff. And I know that you and the superintendent have been meeting in town halls with the advisory committees to ask for input, to really look at the budget that we have tentatively sketched out for next year. We know we're going to have to find somewhere between $40 and $60 million in terms of closing the gap. So if we could do that, and then we can also give our employees an increase, that would be great. So if everybody can work together and try to help us find ways to close that gap and also maintain an increase, that would be great. But I think we need to give the superintendent flexibility to come up with the best that we possibly can for our staff. So I'm very comfortable with this direction. Thank you. Thanks everybody who's worked so hard on it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Dorn. Ms. Talento.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. I do not have any questions on the budget direction. I appreciate the efforts to ensure that we brought, that everyone's feedback was considered. And I think that this provides us the flexibility we're going to need to tackle the budget year next year, which I think is, dire. And I also agree that to the extent possible, however we can, if we can give the staff a compensation increase, but I also, I think we just need to be very, very direct and candid that we're looking at a $60 million deficit right now, and that wherever we are now generally tends to reduce depending on how things are moving forward, but that's next year's budget. We have a gap in the current budget we're in, so I don't know how much better it can get. And so I just think, I've been advocating for a raise for everyone in these years that we've had to make cuts, and step increases don't cover that for everyone. But I understand the need for a step and how that affects our skills, and I really would like us to continue to do compensation studies and research to see if there's a better compensation model that allows us to make sure it's sustainable as well as compensating all of our staff. So I won't be here when you all adopt the budget, but I think that this budget direction provides that kind of guidance where it allows you to look for those, do the research, look for models that we can sustain in the future so that we're not in this constant situation and we're entering a recession. I mean, the last Great Recession, it took us from 2008, 2009 to 2015, where we finally were able to start putting in step increases, but that didn't include a COLA. And so I just think we really need to look at how the models, because I don't think the step increase in COLA model is sustainable. And I don't want our teachers to go through, or anyone else on staff to go through what we went through between 2009 and 2016. And then for all the staff that didn't get paid from 2016 to now because they weren't on a step and we didn't do COLAs. So I think this budget direction provides that flexibility. It focuses on that study. It's going to be a tough year, and I just think we need to say that and own that. And I don't have any other comments on this. Just thank everyone for the work. It was a difficult, it's going to be a difficult budget, and the direction is, I think, is as strong as we can get it to give us the greatest flexibility possible to meet our needs. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Talento. Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you. Yeah, last night at the joint work session with the county, I made remarks about how important it is that we give a compensation increase to our staff. I'm going to repeat some of those remarks tonight. My biggest concern in the upcoming budget is compensation for the APS workforce. I'm deeply concerned that the confluence of several factors will mean the reduction of quality in our workforce and our inability to recruit and retain the best and the brightest. And with that reduction, the diminishment of Arlington's greatest attraction, which is our highly rated school system. So we did not provide a compensation increase in this year's budget. We have not given a COLA increase in 5 years, while all of the surrounding school divisions have. Our compensation does not lead in any teacher's step. The surrounding school divisions have seen blood in the water and have invested in greater compensation for their workforces. Prince William County, their top of the scale is $25,000 higher than ours. That will enable them to recruit and retain the most experienced teachers who move from other jurisdictions, including ours. Even when we did give staff increases, not all of our workforce were included in those increases. The long-awaited compensation study was supposed to fix that last year, but it did not. Housing is cheaper in all of those surrounding jurisdictions, cheaper than it is in Arlington. Teacher morale is down because of the extraordinary additional time and effort that they've been devoting to make virtual learning happen, combined with their fear that they'll be forced into an in-person environment that's unhealthy and unsafe. Then there's a national teacher shortage that we see in smaller pools of applicants at recruitment events, which has already affected our ability to hire the best and the brightest. I know staff compensation is our single biggest expenditure, but it's a mistake to look at that large amount as an easy target for a cut. It is our greatest single expenditure because it's our single greatest asset. It's a high quality, our asset is a high quality workforce that delivers high quality instruction and assures student success. Everything we do, every lesson taught, every connection with a student, every IEP conference is made better when delivered by high quality, experienced teachers and staff. Now, we have a policy that requires the superintendent to bring a step increase in his proposed budget. Several of my colleagues want to waive that requirement as we provide budget direction. So to them, I say that when you waive the requirement to bring a step increase, you close off the information that staff can bring us on how they would provide a budget with a compensation increase in it. We need to know this so we can then decide how acceptably that budget balances compensation with other budget line items. Once we know this, we can then decide to maintain that balance or adjust it or reject it. But waiving that requirement now, before we see what an alternative could be, robs us of vital information that we need as we look to the future. It is too early for me to make the decision that I don't need full information about how to best assure the continuation of a high-quality school system. I've heard my colleagues say they would love it if we can give the staff a compensation increase. Hope is not a strategy. The budget direction is the time to give direction, to make what we wish to happen actually happen. I am not going to be able to support a budget direction that waives our compensation policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldstein. Dr. Candidate?
Yes, thank you. First, thank you, Ms. O'Grady, Dr. Duran, Ms. Peterson, for putting together this budget direction. There's a lot I like about this budget direction. It's reflective of the work we've done over the years. There are a lot of themes that we've brought forward year after year in our budget direction. It shows our consistency. It shows our commitment to the strategic plan. We've also, of course, updated it to the time we're in, and there's a lot that shows that we've already been doing a lot of hard work. We understand the situation we're in and are describing that in this direction. So there's a lot I like, and I would love to support it for what I like. However, I agree with what Mr. Goldstein said. I understand we're facing a budget deficit at this point, but I do not want to identify one specific item being our staff, our traditional compensation that is in policy. I don't want to identify that one item as the first way we're talking about balancing our budget. If you read the budget direction, everything else is pretty positive about what we're trying to do. Again, committing to our goals, committing to our strategic plan. If possible, do this. If possible, do that. But then we say we're going to waive our policy on staff compensation. That is something that I do not believe I'll be able to support when this comes for action in 2 weeks. But again, like I said, there is a lot I think that's well done in this document. At the end of the day, I think it's premature to be waiving our policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cannon, and I appreciate all my colleagues' comments. I will recognize myself, and I want to also thank Ms. Peterson and Dr. Duran and my colleagues for helping to craft this budget direction. And there is a lot, I think, of many positive things in this budget direction, and including continuing to keep our students at the forefront. However, unfortunately, we are in a situation in these times of the pandemic that we are facing some serious budget challenges. And I therefore believe it is important for us to give the superintendent the flexibility to be able to look at this budget holistically and be able to come forward with the best budget that he feels will meet the needs of our students and our staff. And I would like to share that waiving the budget direction or waiving the policy around the staff compensation does not preclude the superintendent from including compensation increases for our staff if he can figure out a way to do that and meet all the other needs in our budget direction. So I just want to be incredibly clear that this does not eliminate the possibility for our staff, for our superintendent to put in a compensation increase for our staff that he feels he can work into his proposed budget. What it does is it does give him the flexibility to be able to look at our budget holistically without a requirement of any one particular thing. In fact, there's not really a requirement of one particular thing at any particular level that he needs to address. So this puts that on par with his ability to be able to use his best thinking to propose his first budget for our school system at a time when we're facing a pandemic, at a time when we are facing a current budget deficit, and a time when we are facing up to a 60 plus or more $1 million deficit for the upcoming year, when we could continue to have increasing costs due to the pandemic or due to other factors that are currently unforeseen. So I do believe that this opportunity for the superintendent to give his best thinking and these particular conditions that we're in, I think is an important opportunity. I trust that the superintendent will be able to make those decisions. And as we shared, if it is possible, this is something we would like to see, some sort of compensation increase for our staff. But I personally do feel it's important to give him the opportunity to be able to look at all of these things holistically and make some good decisions. And who knows what will happen and how our budget and the forecast may or may not change. And so that's why I think it is important to give him that opportunity. With that, I think that we may be ready to move on. And I'm not seeing any other folks who want to comment. Let me.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I do see you, Nancy. I'm sorry. My screen went away, so now I do see you that you would like to comment. Please,
Yes,
I recognize you.
I do think I want to recap a little bit about what I said last night and why I think it's important for us to waive our salary. It's our salary policy. It's not the compensation policy. It's a salary policy. And I'm going to give my rationale for that right now. At best, we currently have a $40 million deficit next year at this point. That is using all of our reserves and closeout. That's at this point, at the current projection, that is our best case scenario. A compensation increase is, I understand it, about almost $12 million. If we have to close that gap of $40 million, and the average cost to our system of an employee is $100,000, that would be 400 employees. We would have to reduce our workforce by 400 employees in order to close that gap. And in addition, we can increase class size, which is $5 million for each student. That would be 8 additional kids in each class. Now, I strongly believe we're not going to do those things, but the work that we're going to go through is going to be so we avoid any of that. In addition, if we can give our great staff and teachers a salary, some kind of an increase, that would be fantastic. But it is going to take all of us working together, scrubbing that budget. But in addition, I raised last night that we will likely need to ask the county for some support. And I specifically asked if we could use money from the rainy day fund that APS has paid into. And I don't know if we've got a rainier day in my lifetime or going forward. So I do think we should ask for some support there. But we don't know if that's going to happen. And if we tie the superintendent's hands and talk only about a step increase, which is the wording in our policy is a step increase, a full step increase, it precludes him from bringing forward any kind of a COLA. And in this year, that may be more responsible. And by waiving this policy in the face of a $40 million deficit, in increasing class sizes, or laying off teachers, I think the responsible thing for our staff and for our superintendent is to give him the leeway to come up with the best we can do in this coming year after we've all worked together to close that gap and to ask the county for help. I don't want to presume where we're going to be in 2 or 3 months, but that's the situation that we have now, and we're giving this direction in that setting. So I do think I want to give the superintendent the leeway to do the best he can with the information he has as we go forward. And if we tie it to a step, then we are not giving him the leeway, hopefully, to at least come forward with some kind of a COLA. So I just wanted to give that rationale and to equate that money to real calculations that we all have to take into account, because the two biggest levers for our cost, 85% of our budget is salary, is compensation, because it's benefits and salary. That's 85% of our budget. So it's virtually impossible to close that gap without affecting either class size or the number of employees we have. So I hope that we can reorganize, do things differently, and let's all work together to do that. But I want the superintendent to have the leeway to bring something forward, because if it's only a step, we may not be able to afford that this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Dorn. I am not seeing any additional hands. So with that, I will just mention that this item will come back for action at our next meeting on November the 5th. Next, we'll hear the First Amendment to the lease agreement with Highland Holdings, LLC. Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so Kathy Lynn, Director of Facilities and Operations, will be presenting this item on the First Amendment to the lease agreement with the Highlands Holding, LLC, which will come back for action at the November 5th meeting. Ms. Lynn.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. This evening, we'd like to present the First Amendment to the lease agreement with Highland Holdings for the ECDC parking garage to allow spaces for our staff at the Arlington Career Center, Montessori Public School of Arlington, and the Arlington Community High School. Next slide, please. Last school year, we entered into our current lease agreement with Highland Holdings for 50 parking spaces at the ECDC parking garage. This lease agreement gave us a term for 1 year that ended this past August 30th of 2020. It allowed us to have 50 parking spaces at 901 South Highland Street that would support staff parking for our 3 schools, Arlington Career Center, Arlington Community High School, and the Montessori Public School of Arlington. We had a rental rate for the 12-month lease term of $51,000. Next slide. This summer, in preparation for in-person learning, there are additional relocatable classrooms on the surface parking lot between the 3 schools to meet the growing needs of the Arlington Career Center student population. With this summer, we also requested from Highland Holdings a lease amendment to our current lease agreement, and that request would include 50 additional parking spaces at the ECDC parking garage and a rent abatement until we could resume in-person learning for this school year. This October, this month, Highland Holdings agreed to the proposed First Amendment to the lease agreement. Next slide, please. The proposed lease amendment to this lease agreement for the term extends our initial term to next August 31st, 2021. It includes 50 additional parking spaces for a total of 100 leased parking spaces in the parking garage. And it allows us to have rental abatement through December 31st of this year, 2020. The rental abatement beyond December 31st was denied. So our rental payment will be due 7 days prior to giving notice to recommence use of the parking garage. An estimated rate for this school year will be about $76,500 for 9 months if we decide to recommence our parking December 1st of 2020. The terms in the lease remain the same. Next slide, please. Our staff recommendation is to consent to this First Amendment to the lease agreement with Highland Holdings. What it does is it provides needed space for staff at our 3 schools in this location. Our rental rate will be about $76,500 for the 100 total parking spaces for 9 months, December 2020 through August 2021. Our department, Facilities and Operations, will review our current budget, this school year's budget, to accommodate the additional costs. This First Amendment agreement has been reviewed and approved by APS Legal Counsel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynn, for making that presentation. I'd like to turn to my colleagues to see if they have any comments or questions. Ms. Talento, let's start with you.
I do not have any comments or questions on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldstein?
I do, yes, thank you. Kathy, thanks for the presentation. Could you put that last slide up, please? Thanks. I'm curious about the second bullet. Facilities and operations will review the current budget to accommodate additional cost. I mean, we're continually being told that, revenues are down when we adopted this budget, and that costs are up during the current budget, because of the pandemic. So I'm curious what our facilities and operations review will look like, and where or how we're going to find $76,500 on December 1st.
Right. So this year's school budget we did budget some amount for parking spaces for ECDC garage. So we would have to find about an additional $37,000 within our budget. What we're doing right now is we're looking through all our line items and looking at potential savings we may have because we have not returned in person in full. So we may have some overtime budget that we can look at and accommodate. We may also have some possible savings with our fuel, with our bus drive and our bus fleet, transportation fleet, and things like that. So those are the areas we have been asked to look at because of the budget challenges this year, and that there are no additional funds to offset that for the parking.
Okay, thank you. So, we're not back to in-person. And so I'm curious about the need for 100 parking spaces. Now, I think you said in a previous slide that rental abatement after December was denied. What does that mean? That we have to pull the trigger on this by December 1st? What happens if we don't? They're not going to rent it to us after December 1st?
When we requested rental abatement, we were hoping to receive rental abatement until we returned in person and we required these spaces. They granted us some rental relief abatement, so they granted us through December 31st, 2020. So if, in fact, we don't need the spaces until January, we would not have to pay rent until January 1st. However, starting January 1st, we would have to pay rent for this lease agreement.
Mr. Goldstein, I believe that you may be on mute. We can't hear you.
Yes, I was. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Heads up. Well, suppose we say on January 1st, we still don't need them, but, we come back to them on February 1st or sometime after January 1st. I mean, is it out of the question that they would be considering renting to us?
We would then have to go back and work with our legal counsel to see, but I believe our legal counsel tried his best to find some kind of agreement that would allow us rental abatement. And it was, I guess, between the two parties, they did not want to go past December 31st, 2020.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynn. And Mr. Goldstein, if you have any additional questions, I can come back around to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you.
Would you like me to come back around to you?
I'm thinking.
Okay, let me know. Okay, now I'd like to go to Dr. Cannonen.
No questions. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I do know that Ms. Van Doorn did not have any questions for this item, and I appreciate the presentation, Ms. Lynn. Thank you very much. I thought it was rather clear. I appreciate the additional questions that Mr. Goldstein posed, and I thought you clearly answered them. So, Mr. Goldstein, was there something else that you needed to follow up on?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay, well then, thank you very much, and thank you again to Ms. Lynn. This item will come back for action at our November the 5th meeting. Now we
Thank
have...
you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Now we have proposed changes to School Board Policy K-14.30, volunteers, and Policy K-14.31, volunteer programs. Dr. Duran.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Assistant Superintendent Catherine Ashby to introduce this and introduce staff who will help her present. Ms. Ashby? Ms. Ashby, you're on mute.
Yes, I was. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Duran and school board members for allowing us to present updates to the volunteer and partner policy. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Daryl Johnson, who is the coordinator for family engagement for APS, and he has done a lot of the work on the policy, so I will turn to him to present. Mr. Johnson?
Yes. So good evening, School Board Chair Grady and school board members. I would like to present about the policy, the volunteer and partner policy. If we could pull up the presentation. Okay. And so we've been working on the policy for a while as a part of our 5-year process to update all of our policies. So the primary impetus for this policy is the safety and security of our students. So we want to make sure that all students are in a safe and secure environment. And we also want to make sure that the volunteers and partners policy is being revised to outline the goal of the program, the Volunteers and Partners program, define the role of a volunteer, partner, and visitor, detail the screening and approval process for volunteers and partners, and align the policy with regional volunteer program best practices at other regional school divisions. So many school divisions have recently revised their policies for volunteers and partners to still allow parents, guardians, and community members to enrich the learning experiences of students while adequately screening volunteers to diminish the risk of allowing individuals who have been charged with sexual offenses to have access to students and staff. As part of the development of the Volunteers and Partners policy, the School and Community Relations team reviewed and benchmarked the Volunteers and Partners policies of other school systems nationally and regionally. Following this review process, updates were made to our policy to align it with other regional school divisions. Next slide. Okay. So some of the changes made to the policy for K-14.30, volunteers and partners, and since the volunteer definition has been incorporated into this updated policy, we are proposing to delete the policy K-14.31, volunteer programs, because the majority of the content in that policy has been incorporated into this updated policy. The name of the policy, K-14.30, has also been changed from volunteers to now volunteers and partners to reflect the purpose of the policy in the new name. Some of the updates to the policy include it outlines the goal of the Volunteers and Partners program. It includes language on the required sex offender registry screening for all volunteers and partners, provides detail on the required safe schools training for all volunteers and partners because Virginia is a mandatory reporter state for reporting child abuse and/or neglect. And then it defines the difference between a volunteer, partner, and visitor, clarifies the roles of volunteers and partners and how they are not to be used for the administration of IEPs, 504 plans, and/or individualized healthcare plans. It also details the volunteers and partners screening and approval process, and it ensures any students or families' personally identifiable information is protected under FERPA and HIPAA. And then also it adds standard policy evaluation language included in all updated policies. It is important to note that undocumented immigrants are still able to apply to be a volunteer or partner because the sex offender registry checks their information against the information of individuals on the sex offender registry, but we are not at no time during the screening and approval process checking their citizenship status. This aligns with the policy's overall goal to allow members from the community to enrich the educational experiences of students. Next slide. Okay, the PIP slide. So for the PIP K-14.30 PIP 1 volunteers, this is updated to reflect the current online application and screening process for volunteers that is followed by the volunteer and partnership liaisons at each school. Additionally, this revised PIP will standardize the volunteer program so the process at each school is streamlined and consistent. The updates to the PIP includes defining the difference between a volunteer and chaperone, outlining the roles and responsibilities of volunteers, designating the volunteers and partner liaisons at each school manages the volunteers and partners program and the duties associated with managing the program, and details the screening and approval process for all volunteers. Next slide. And for K-14.30 PIP2 partners, this PIP was created to provide community partners with information on participating in the partnership program and the steps of the partner application process. Some of the changes to the PIP include defining the difference between a resource partner, a service partner, strategic partner, and work-based experience / profile of Virginia graduate partner. It also outlines the goals and outcomes for partner organizations. It designates the volunteers and partners liaison at each school as the person who manages the school's volunteers and partners program and the duties associated with managing the program. It details the screening and approval process for all partners and the individual screening process for everyone associated with the partner organization. Next slide. And so those are the updates that we have that we're proposing for the policy, the volunteers and partners policy, K-14.30, as well as the 2 supporting PIPs. And now I'll turn it back over to Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Daryl, for that presentation. And Cheryl Grady, if there are any questions, this will come back for approval at the next board meeting on November 5th, but I'll turn it if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duran. I just want to say how nice it is to see Mr. Johnson and Ms. Lynn presenting to us. There's a lot of people who do a lot of work here in our district, and it's wonderful to be able to see some of them present to us at the school board and have the community to be able to see them as well. With that, I'm going to start with Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Dorn.
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Talento.
No, thank you. I thought it was, I really appreciate how you all did the policy and rewrote it. So thank you for that. I think it's clear and I appreciate the work. And thank you for the clarification. We have a lot of parents who may not have the ability to provide the documentation that is generally requested, and knowing that they can still be part of their child's experience is very appreciated. So thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Talento. I understand that Dr. Cannon and our vice chair does not have any comments at this time, and I do not have any questions. Just want to thank Mr. Johnson and the communications team for their work on this. Volunteers are very important in our for our school system, and knowing and understanding how to be a part of, to volunteer for your community and ensuring that we're keeping our students safe while we are encouraging volunteers to participate is very important. So appreciate that, and we look forward to this item coming back for action at our November the 5th meeting. With that, we'd like to hear now the proposed changes to the school board policy I apologize. The next information item is the revision of school board policy I-7.2.3.30 communications. Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. And for this information item, Assistant Superintendent Bridget Loft will be presenting this. Ms. Loft.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. So I'm pleased to share the proposed policy revision to I-7.2.3.30, the communication policy. As you can see on the next slide, the following summary provides information about the proposed revisions. Much of the work that was done to revise this policy was to become in alignment with our Department of Justice settlement agreements. And it also included an update of language to reflect restructuring of the Department of Teaching and Learning. Finally, there was an update of language to clarify processes related to translation and interpretation services available for staff and parents. The PIP will also have suggested changes to language related to the points noted in this slide, as well as clarification about specific screening that occurs within a school building. And that summarizes the updates related to the communication policy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Loft. I appreciate that presentation. Now I'd like to go to my colleagues for comments or questions. I'd like to go to Ms. Talento. Ms. Talento?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Law, for the presentation. And I want to thank you for the thorough review of ensuring that it complied with our DOJ settlement agreement. I just have one comment. So I didn't have any questions or comments on the policy, and I appreciated that. I did review the PIPs, and we do not adopt PIPs. So this is just comment for your feedback. But on page 2 of PIP 1 for this policy, we have in clause 11, it says that except in an emergency, Arlington Public Schools will not use students, family, or friends of limited English proficient parents, guardians, or Google Translate for interpretation of district, division, or school generated documents, etc. And I believe this is taken directly from the DOJ settlement agreement, which I appreciate. But there are other translation applications online, and I just wonder if it'd be prudent for us to just take it a step further and say Google Translate or any other online translation services. I know that there may be emergencies where we have to use family members or friends or even desperately an online application, but I think in policies and PIPs we should be as thorough as possible. So some people actually read things literally and will say, well, I can't use Google Translate, but they didn't talk about the other applications. So I just ask you to consider that in the PIP, because I think the idea is that we don't know how well online translation services work. So that's just for consideration. And Dr. Duran, I think this next question is really for you, or it's just for your awareness. We used to get an LEP report, and in PIP 1 again, it talks about how Arlington Public Schools Language Services Registration Center prepares an annual survey of limited English proficient students to determine the languages of Arlington Public Schools families. And this has happened every year, and we used to have this really, what I thought was a very comprehensive report based on the survey that they would do. It would tell us in about 20 to 30 pages, because it just had wonderful data, how many students we had that spoke each language, the different countries that they came from. It summarized how many languages were in our school system, how many students were receiving language level 1 services, level 2 services, and it just was a really nice report about the data based on our English learner. I think it was about a year or two, and I believe I was told that the person's seat who I filled, Dr. Emma Villan Sanchez, was a strong advocate for making this public and available to the board. I think last year was 2 years ago, they changed the format and they limited the information, which I was very disappointed in, and we didn't get one last year. But it was usually get it around February. I had asked for it, the pandemic hit. So, I don't know if there was one done, but I just know it's just something, and we used to get it in our weekly report. So I just asked that we can look at that again. In this PIP, it doesn't state that we'll get that report. What it says is that it will be provided, it says to identify LEP students who need language assistance. APS will ask parents to indicate on a home language survey whether they need school, division level communications in a language other than English, etc. And then it says APS will make information regarding LEP parents' needs for interpreters and translations readily accessible to administrators and teachers through the student information system. But it does not provide the school board any information or ability for us to see how well our English Learner Service program is, how many students we're serving, what kind of students we're serving. So if you could just follow up on that and see what happened to that report, did they stop and why? And is there some way that, because we don't have access to the SIS, nor should we, it's private student information, but I think understanding the students and the community that we're serving in our English learner community, considering that they're a high population of our student base, as well as being under a DOJ settlement agreement, would be very valuable to the school board.
Sure, Ms. Talento, I will certainly look into that, and thank you for bringing that to my attention as awareness. Being new, not familiar with that past history on that, but I certainly will look in to see where it is and what we can do to bring some information back to the board, and we'll provide that to you and to the full board in follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair O'Grady.
Thank you very much, Ms. Talento. I see that I have no other comments from my other colleagues. And so with that, I'd just like to inform the community that this item will come back for action at our November the 5th meeting. And our last agenda item tonight is revision of School Board Policy J-8.3.1, School Health. Dr. Duran.
And for this last item, we'll once again ask Assistant Superintendent Bridget Loft to present this item. Thank you, Ms. Loft. Ms. Loft, not sure if you're on mute.
Apologies there. If we could go to the next slide, I'd like to share some of the recent history about the revision of the school health policy, the revision to the school health services policies and PIPs. Initially, a draft was posted on the Engage page for feedback in spring of 2020, and we brought a draft for information to the board at our meeting, at the board meeting on June 25th of this year. There was a request to allow for some additional feedback. So we went back and worked with the Arlington Special Education Advisory Committee and members of school health to receive additional feedback, and we worked with them over the summer. And so we've revised the policy a good deal, as well as the PIPs, and we're submitting this now for information. The next slide describes the revisions to the policy, so I'll walk you through those. We started with aligning with Virginia Code, and you can see there's a link on this slide regarding the administration of naloxone or other opioids antagonists and the authorization of some over-the-counter medications. We added sections related to individual health care plans. And we updated the language to clarify the relationship between school health of Arlington County Department of Human Services and APS and the services provided in the schools. And I really want to emphasize how helpful it was to work in concert with school health on these policy revisions. We also updated the language to reflect restructuring of DTL. As we were working through the policy and the PIPs, we recognized that we needed to separate the policy implementation procedures into two PIPs. Initially, there was one, and that's because there's significant information about school health services in the policy, and we wanted to speak to how those would be implemented, and school health entry requirements. And so we felt by separating them into two PIPs, that made it much more coherent. Finally, just want to share that if a student has a 504 plan or an IP with the stated need for monitoring insulin within the school building, that staff will provide that support. And that concludes the updates to the policies.
Thank you, Ms. Loft.
Thank you, Dr. Duran, and thank you, Ms. Loft. With that, I would like to ask my colleagues if they have any comments or questions. I'll start with Ms. Talento this time. Ms. Talento?
I do, and Ms. Loft, I realized that you may have been on mute when I was speaking the last time. I didn't hear anything, so I continued with Dr. Duran, so I apologize if you were speaking. I didn't hear you, and I may have unintentionally cut you off when I was giving you the comment about the PIP. So if I did, I'm sorry. And then on this one, as I was reading it, I had a question about self-administered over-the-counter medicine. It looked like the older language said that we allowed students in high school to carry self-administered over-the-counter medicine, which I assume is like Tylenol and Advil. But in the new policy, it says they're required to get they're required to submit paperwork or something to that effect. I don't have the policy in front of me. The old language said with parent permission, but it didn't classify what that parent permission looked like. So my question is, what is our current practice, and are we asking our students to do something completely different? So like I know when my child was in high school, they suffered from allergies, so sometimes they got sinus headaches, and I might send them to school with Tylenol. I don't know if I was not doing appropriate practice or if we're changing our practice, but I think if you can provide clarity on that, I think that'd be very helpful to understand if this policy is changing current practice for our kids, or if we need to just inform our kids about how to make sure they have what they need to self-administer that kind of medicine.
Sure. So we differentiated in the policy between elementary students and secondary students. I will say, well, I should say, I'm sorry, we've differentiated between prescription medication and over-the-counter. So since you're asking about the over-the-counter medication,
Right.
The policy really hasn't changed significantly, except to say that the student is able to self-administer over-the-counter medications as long as they've got the medication authorization form signed by the parent and submitted to the clinic in advance. So we want to make sure that each of our clinics has an understanding. If the parent is in favor of the child self-administering, then that we've got that documentation on hand.
Okay.
And then if families have questions, of course, they can contact the school clinic for additional clarification.
Okay, so thank you. So I know this is, so Dr. Duran, I would ask you to consider then maybe in our first day packet for our high schoolers, we have some type of authorization form that is part of that verification process. I'm just concerned that people take for granted at that age that they may be, kids may bring that to school, an Advil or a Tylenol, and if they don't have that authorization, what is the disciplinary consequence on something that's unintended? Where if we just made it part of our annual online verification process, where it says, you know, do you allow your child to self-administer Tylenol or Advil, right? If so, then this is what it allows your child to do for the year. And I would defer to our instructional staff and yourself as to whether that starts in high school or middle school. But I just think that we have to be realistic versus putting policies in place that become restrictive and then may lead to this unintended disparities or consequences for our students. So I think it's fine, but maybe we can consider something like that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Talento. I appreciate that. And I can tell that I have no additional questions or comments from my other colleagues. And I do have one comment. I just wanted to thank Ms. Loft for helping, and the policy subcommittee for helping to make sure we had additional time to hear those additional comments. I did appreciate that the Arlington Special Education Advisory Committee had some very detailed thoughts and concerns regarding the policy, and I appreciated us allowing the time to delve into those questions and concerns, and I think it did make for some better improvements for the policy. So thank you very much, and that item will come back for action as well at our next meeting on November the 5th. Board members, is there any new business this evening? Going once, going twice.
Mr. Goldstein's birthday's next week.
Oh, that may require a song. Go ahead. Start us off.
Okay. Are you ready, Reed? We're going to sing happy birthday to you.
Is he still there?
He's
He
still
is, and
there.
he's smiling ear to ear on that. Okay.
Ms. O'Grady?
Yes.
Ms. O'Grady, you probably should gavel out before.
Okay. We'll do that.
Why? Why?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to hear us sing.
I guess I can be expecting a big present then from Dr.
I thought it was
Kennedy.
new
It's
business.
kinda
if
new
a
business.
Our board members having a birthday. He's still with us. It's very, very, very big blessing to have you with us. But Mr. Grady, you can gavel out, and maybe Jason will entertain us and allow us to sing to
Okay.
Mr. Goldstein.
All right, I'll do that. Seeing that the only business left is the birthday business, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Okay, Reed, you have to stay on.
Just want to note to everybody that it's not too early to shop.
Mike's here.
There we go.
Oh, he turned it back on.
Oh.
Are you guys going to sing?
We're
until
trying, but we
everybody
couldn't
left gets
hear.
to hear you?
You're
Because
singing.
they stopped the production. Thank you, Barbara.
Which is fine.
Nancy wants to do a solo.
Birthday to
You.
You,
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Reed. Woo!
Happy birthday to
You.
And many more.
I can do it in
Thank you.
Spanish. You want it in Spanish?
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy
Feliz
birthday.
cumpleaños, Reed. Happy
Thank you. Thank
birthday.
you all.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Joy.